TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Edition of the RF Video Shoot Interview Series, and it is an absolute honor and a pleasure to be sitting with wrestling's true living legend, Bruno Sammartino. Bruno, welcome to the shoot.
Well, thank you very kindly. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Starting off, your childhood overseas in your homeland country, what was it like growing up in the war?
Well, recently, because I've done quite a few interviews and some films have been done, documentaries and that, a lot of people are quite surprised. At least that's the kind of mail I've received, or people that I run into are surprised because they knew Bruno the wrestler, but they didn't know about Bruno's early life, his childhood in Europe during World War II. That was a very traumatic time in my life because I was born in October of 1935. My father came to America in January 1936. I was 3 months old when my father came to America.
Wow.
So I never knew my dad till I came to America in 1950 because you see, when the war came, all passages were closed and my father was stuck here. But my poor mom was stuck in Italy with all these children. And when the SS troops invaded my town, they killed 1/3 of the town.
Wow.
And 2/3 were lucky enough to escape. We went to a mountain called Vallarocca, where we spent 14 months. And in these 14 months, it was sheer hell, because the winters in those mountains, one has to experience to believe how ferocious they were. The food situation was horrendous. My mom used to sneak down from that mountain, which would take a day, and sneak into our town while the Nazis were sleeping upstairs. She would go in the back of our home and get in, because we lived off our land and we made provisions for the winter. And she would get some potatoes, some corn, some wheat, whatever she could get her hands on. And then we would ration it up in that mountain, eat a little bit of time so that mom wouldn't have to make the trip. But when winter was so bad, there were days when you just lived on snow alone.
Wow.
And as a result of this, a lot of young children died. A lot of older people died, a lot of sickness. It was extremely, extremely difficult time. And we were there for 14 months, like I say, when the last battle was fought in my town and we were given words that we could come back. I had to literally be carried by my mom because I had been so sick during the war. We found out later that I had come down with rheumatic fever.
Wow.
Now, how lucky can you be? Most people, not most people, let me take it back because I'm not a doctor. A lot of people, even with medical care, go through horrible times and many times don't even make it. And here I was under these conditions. 3 years I was laying there in our home by a little stove that my mom had. She kept feeding wood to, and with a blanket laying on the floor, and she would turn me over, and they put leeches on my body. The theory was that this would take the poisonous blood out of you. Anyway, I went through all this horrendous stuff, and when my mom and dad connected again, and the decision was to be made, should my dad come back to Italy, or should bring us over here? And my mom naturally said, for the sake of the kids and everything, if you could bring us there, because there's nothing here. Everything's been destroyed. And so I actually kept my family back because I couldn't pass the physical. This was in 1948.
Wow.
I got a little healthier by 1950, and I was able to pass the physical. But when we came to America, that's why it's stories like people say, come on, because when they saw me at the height of my career when I was 275, they couldn't believe that when I was 14 years old, I weighed like 80, 81 pounds.
Yeah.
But it was because of all that.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I came to America, that's the kind of shape I was in. I mean, I was really, I wasn't the 97-pound weakling. I was the 80-pound weakling.
Wow. What did you do when you first got to America?
Well, there again, as a child in the old country, not knowing anything, I used to hear of America, and the expression in my town and people who had been in, they used to say the expression was that America, that the streets are paved in gold, because this is truly a land of opportunity. And I took that literally as a young boy, 8, 9 years old, and I thought that, wow, America is so rich and I envisioned in my mind that all you would see in America is palaces and villas and whatever. So you can imagine that when we came to America And we got on a train to go from New York to Pittsburgh. First of all, Pittsburgh, if you go back to 1950, a lot of people know its history of the steel mills.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, because he never drove or could drive, he bought a home that was going to be close to where he worked, which was the steel mills. My dad had worked in the coal mines for years, but now he got a job in the steel mills in Pittsburgh, okay? So when you left my house, when you got out of my front door of my house and you made a right turn, you went about a block down, and seemed like about 100 steps, and it took you right to the mill where my father worked. But the thing about the mill those days is you never saw the sun. It was Pittsburgh used to be known as the Smoky City.
Wow.
Because of those steel mills. It was not very pleasant. So anyway, imagine this, me having got this picture of America.
Right.
As all these palaces, and here my poor dad had bought this old house.
Yeah.
That's all he could afford, and he was making payments, not like paid for. In fact, he paid $6,000 for this house.
Wow.
But when we came in there was wallpaper, and it was bulging because of the plaster that was coming on. And frankly, I was shocked because in Italy, with the war, we understand that, but with these stone homes, you know.
Yeah.
And so now this is America. I'm expecting we're going to be living in a villa or something.
Right.
And I see this old house with the plaster practically falling off the walls. And I must say, it was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
But of course, it didn't take that long to understand and realize that how fortunate we were to have made it to America.
Yeah. Now, once you got to America, can you talk about your evolution into the pro wrestling business?
Can we stop a second?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I asked you about your evolution into the wrestling business.
Well, after we came to this country, because of, as I explained about my dad, where he bought this home and so forth, it was not in an Italian area. And unfortunately, which I did not understand at the time, we were going to language school, my brother and I, to learn to speak, because we could speak a word of English when we came here. So there was this school not far from where we lived that we walked to, and trying to learn the English language. And kids, as the old saying goes, kids can be cruel because we were different nationality. God knows what they heard.
Yeah.
Every day we were getting beat up. Always came home with a black eye or a cut lip or bleeding nose. And it got so bad that my father, who spoke very poor English, even though he had been here for a number of years, he went to that school and he said, you know, these kids have gone through hell and back through the war. We lost part of our family. I lost a sister and a brother. He said, now that we're in America, and I said, they go to school and they come home bleeding at night. He said, there's something wrong with that. Can't you people do something about it? And they were very sympathetic. And so what they did for us, which was very nice, they allowed us to go to school 15 minutes late after school would start, and leave us out before school let out so that we would have a chance. We would run home.
Yeah.
But there was a kid named, they called him Moose Simon, Maurice. He belonged to a club called the YMHA, the YMW is a Young Men and Women Hebrew Association, but anybody could join. And he felt sorry for us, and he said, because he lived in my neighborhood.
Okay.
And now we're picking up the English language, not well, but we're starting to communicate a little bit. And he said, why don't you come to the Y with me, he says, and I'll show you exercise. And I don't know what he was talking about because I'd never heard of weights, never seen weights, not in those mountains where I was born at, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to see those mountains. Whoever heard of anything like that? And I walked with him on a Sunday. We went to the YMHA. And when I went in that gym, I seen guys, at least in my eyes at that time, they looked pretty darn good. These guys were working out with the weights, you know. And they looked good. I thought, wow. And I seen these weights, and I thought, what in the world? You know, I didn't understand it because I never seen it. I don't know what weights were.
Yeah.
And so I was asking him, I said, you mean by doing that, you can get, you know, muscles like that? And he says, yeah. And he himself looked pretty good, you know, because he worked out somewhat. Oh, I wanted to do this, and I'll never forget the membership was $12. Yeah, this
Wow.
this is in close to towards the latter part of 1950.
Okay.
So we got the $12 by cutting people's grass.
Wow.
We would go cut people's grass, and they give you a quarter, they give you 50 cents, but it raised $12, and I joined the Y.
Wow.
And I will tell you this: that when I went to the Y, believe me, it was almost embarrassing. I could lift nothing. I mean, just a little empty bar net. But despite that, it was something about it that when this guy was showing me a little bit, but I was using feathers, like I say. Despite all that, I got a feeling that this was for me.
Wow.
That something really positive was going to come out of this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait, because I was told you had to work out every other day. You couldn't train every day. I couldn't wait till the next workout. I wanted to be there. And I went with such enthusiasm about it that my appetite was growing. And my poor mom, because we really didn't have much,
right.
So she would make pasta. She would make homemade bread. And I'm eating more and more pasta, more bread. And once a year, my dad... They would make like sausage, and she'd make some, prosciutto and salami, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so she make me sandwiches with this stuff. And I started out with one sandwich. Now I'm in high school. I was up to 3 sandwiches. Then I'm up to 5 sandwiches, because not only was I working out with the weights and getting bigger, gaining weight, and actually see, and if I saw some changes in me, it inspired me that much more. It gave me that much more drive. I wanted to do more. I want to do more. People start thinking I was nuts because I was overdoing. I was pushing. And then they have the wrestling program. So then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'd be working with the wrestling program, and Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I'd be pumping the iron. And I did that. I became an addict. I was addicted to both. I mean, I just couldn't wait to get to either one or the other. And as time went on, I just kept growing and growing. And before everybody was wondering, what was I doing? What's this kid doing? Because in the neighborhood, kids that used to bully me around to beat the heck out of me now wanted to be my friends. They didn't want to fight with you anymore.
Right.
And, I started making a little name for myself because I started competing. I competed both Olympic lifting and powerlifting. Then I started wrestling in different little tournaments and stuff like that. And next thing you know, I set some local city records with the weights.
Okay.
And then a state. And then I got pretty darn good. But my problem was that I had no sponsors. See, when you're in college and whatever, if you're a wrestler, if you're whatever, the school sponsors you. But I didn't have no sponsors. And so it was so difficult because there were contests I wanted to enter, and I couldn't because I didn't have the means to go to these places. So sometimes I'd be frustrated because I would hear about, for example, in wrestling, I'd worked out with this guy that I'd beat him 2-3 times. Then I seen he won the state meet, but they were in Harrisburg. Well, I couldn't go to Harrisburg. I didn't have the funds or anything. I didn't have a car. I didn't have nothing. I'm still in high school.
Sure.
So I was very frustrated by that. But then I got lucky because at the Y, I switched Ys. I left the YMHA and went to the YMCA in East Liberty. It was called a section in Pittsburgh. And these people promised that if I would join their club, that they would sponsor me in some bigger weightlifting meets because they saw that I was getting pretty darn good from the competition that I was appearing in. Long story short, to tell you how I got into wrestling is finally in 1958. There was a national tournament in Oklahoma City, and these people sponsored me, and I went to Oklahoma City, and there I became the North American weightlifting champion.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when I came back, I got some publicity. Now, there was a gentleman in Pittsburgh by the name of Bob Prince, who was known as the voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was the broadcaster, and he also had a television show. Well, this guy used to come into Y for steam, and he didn't work out. He used to come up there to have a steam bath and the massage, all that stuff.
Yeah.
He used to go where they belong, the health club, which that's where the well-to-do people went.
Sure.
The gym is stuff, that's for guys like us, okay?
Right.
But he used to be fascinated with the weights. He'd watch us lift these big weights because by now I'm lifting good weights. I'm lifting some pretty heavy weights. And he used to be fascinated by that. He used to say to me, "My God, how did you do that? How do you do that?" I said, "Well, I've been training, And then he'd see me work out on the mat. Well, anyway, the reason I'm telling you all this is because he saw in the paper that I'd won this contest in Oklahoma City, and he invited me to his television show. Mm-hmm. And when I went to his TV show, he was asking Bruno, he says, I see you lifting weights all the time. He says, and my God, he said, you lift such huge weights and this and that. And he says, and you're still wrestling all the time too. Well, what happened was a gentleman by the name of Rudy Miller, who represented Capital Wrestling, which later was to become the WWF, was in Pittsburgh. He came in that day because the following day, which would have been Saturday, they had studio wrestling in Pittsburgh. And so he happened that evening to be flicking the stations, I guess, and he saw me being interviewed, and he heard wrestling and weightlifting, all that kind of stuff. And when he went to the studio the next day, he asked around, he said, does anybody know this young fellow named Bruno Sammartino? And a kid named John Kurtzonis that I went to high school with, he says, yeah, I know Bruno. He says, we live in the same neighborhood. He said, geez, could you get this kid to come here next week? By now, by the way, I was out of high school in 1955. So now I'm working, I'm working construction.
Yeah.
And so I'm a full-grown guy. By now, by the way, I'm also about 265 pounds, wow. 270 pounds. I was a big guy by then. And so I went to the station the next week, and Rudy Miller asked me questions about how long I'd been wrestling and about this and that, my nationality, all this kind of stuff. And after I answered all that, he said to me, I'd like you to come to Washington, D.C. I have some people that I want them to look at you because, are you interested at all in becoming a professional wrestler? I said, yes, I am. But at the same time, Hart Rooney, who was the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers,
right.
He had invited me to go to camp that summer.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I played a little high school football, but because in those days, the big lineman for the Steelers, a guy by the name of Ernie Stockner, tremendous football player. He was 240 pounds. That's what a lineman was back in the 50s, 250, 240, 235. Well, here I am, I'm 270. Yeah. So they thought that, through summer camp, I could be a heck of a lineman with my size and strength, they felt. And also, he understood a little bit about wrestling because wrestling gives you great leverage as a lineman, to move bodies. And so I asked him right out. I said, Mr. Rooney, I said, if I come to camp for the summer and if I make the team, what can I earn? And he said, well, you could earn up to about $7,000. So a lot of people today find that shocking, but back in 58, 59, that's what a lineman made.
Right.
Well, I asked the same question to the wrestling people. I said, if I go free wrestling, if I can make it, what can I earn? They said, well, you could probably do maybe $30,000 the first year.
Wow. Well,
there was no decision for me to make. I wanted to help out at home, because things we weren't very well off at all. And I wanted to help out, my parents and that. And that's how really what made me pick the wrestling.
Wow.
Over anything else.
Had you watched professional wrestling at all before this conversation that you had with Rudy Miller?
Yes.
Okay.
I had seen it, but we didn't have a TV.
Okay.
But there was another Italian family that had moved in the neighborhood. And they had a TV. So we used to go there because they said Primo Carnera was going to be wrestling. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid in the old country, Carnera was the big name.
Right.
Primo Carnera, the giant. For Italy, he was a giant because he was 6'6", about 270 pounds. And among the Italians, he was a giant.
Sure.
And so I wanted to see this guy, Primo Carnera. I heard so much about him as a little kid in the old country. And that's how I was introduced to watch professional wrestling.
Oh, okay. Okay, excellent. Now, how soon after you met Rudy and you started working for Capital Sports did you meet Vince Sr.?
Oh, no. Right when Rudy Miller invited me to come to Washington, that's why I went to Washington to meet Vince McMahon and Toots Mondt. They were the two partners, Toots Mondt and Vince McMahon Sr. They were the partners of an organization called Capital Wrestling.
Okay.
And they looked me over, and in fact, they didn't say anything to me. They sent me to the arena. They had a couple old-time wrestlers, and they told me, God, let's see what you can do. Nobody said nothing, so I went out there, and I did what I knew best,
Wow.
And that impressed them pretty good. And they said, I'll never forget Toots Mondt, who had been a tough old wrestler. He was a tough old wrestler. He said to me, son, he said, you can have a career here. He said, I would like you to stay here, work out for a couple months, and then he says, start on a professional career. I said, well, I got to get home and let my bosses know at work. So we were building the Hilton Hotel in downtown Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And I said, I have to talk to my wife. I just got married the month
Oh,
before.
okay.
And that's how it started.
Wow. Now, once you started, did anybody, any of the veterans mentor you along the way?
Well, after I started, I came to Washington. They had the old arena there. And I worked out with different guys. Angelo Savoldi, Arnold Scoland, a guy named Tom Bradley. I don't know whatever happened to him because I never saw them once I turned pro. And who else? Jack Vansky.
Okay.
I worked out with the different guys at different times for about, I don't know, maybe a month and a half or whatever. And then they started putting me in preliminary, of course, but in the very smallest arenas, you know, the small places.
Yeah.
And that's how I started.
Now, during that era, how important was it as a professional wrestler to know how to shoot?
How important was it?
How important was it to know how to shoot back then?
Well, I thought it was very important because there were a lot of tough guys in this business, and they didn't want to see anybody. They used to use an expression: "They didn't want to see anybody come in through the back door." Back door meaning without having gone through the right process, which is that to pay your dues. You know, you wrestle, you become a wrestler through amateur wrestling, I think, before you become a pro. So, and if you weren't one of those. Some of those old timers resented you very, very much, and there were guys that didn't last. That got out of the business, and I like that.
Do you remember a specific old timer that maybe gave you a hard time when you started?
Oh, a lot of them gave. Hans Schnabel was very Newman, a guy named what was his first name? They came in there, boy, for blood. I mean, they really came at you hard and fun. But, you know, not bragging, but I was not the type of just to lay back. I just fought back, and after a while, then you develop, you gain some respect from some people because they say, hey, the kid's all right, you know. He takes it and he dishes it out, and no complaints.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you could take it, you were accepted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They didn't want somebody to come in the business because wrestling got the reputation, how much of it's fake, how much of it's real. They didn't want guys in the business that could be challenged by outsiders and disgrace the business by getting beat. They wanted you, the other wrestlers, they wanted you to be able to go out there, and if you had to kick butt.
Gotcha.
You know, that's what they wanted.
Gotcha. Now, how soon after you started wrestling did you start having conversations with Vince and Toots that they wanted to put you in the title situation?
Oh no, that's a different story. It started out great for me. It really did. All of a sudden, you know, I was doing feats of strength. We used to challenge the audience. Guys used to come in from construction. Anybody who could put my arm down get $1,000. Well, nobody ever collected because in those days, you know, not only was I about 270, I got up to 275. But I was exceptionally strong. I mean, I was bench, but I was doing like 5 reps on the bench with 500 pounds.
Wow!
And this is no chemical era. This is, you know, I never even heard of it.
All natural.
Absolutely all natural. And, you know, I was squatting with over 700 pounds. I mean, you know, and so, you know, I was doing all kinds of strength. And then came the question of Haystacks Calhoun, because Calhoun was for the McMahon's territory. And nobody had ever picked up Calhoun. And somebody once asked me, did I think I could pick him up? I said I thought that I could. And I said that on a radio show. And boy, a lot of people wrote in and say, well, let's see if this guy can really pick up Calhoun. In fact, I caught some help from the promoter saying, who are you to go around on a radio show and say something like that? I said, well, I was asked the question. Yeah. And I said, and I merely answered, I said that if given the opportunity, that I thought I could. Yeah. There were so many requests for it that Madison Square Garden itself told McMahon and Toots Mont, they said, why don't we put this young guy, I was 23 years old by now, why don't we put this young guy with Calhoun and see if he can actually pick him up, because there's a lot of interest out there. We're getting a lot of mail and stuff. So the match was finally made. Yeah. And they got some media attention because it was so odd that this young guy says he can pick up Haystacks Calhoun, which nobody had ever done. Well, when we wrestled in the garden, and I'm sure you know by now, I picked up Calhoun. And
Sure.
when I picked up Calhoun, I thought the roof of the garden was going to pop out. I mean, it gave me goosebumps to hear that kind of a reaction. The people went absolutely bananas. Now the media said, well, but does he really weigh 600 pounds? Because they announced him at 601 pounds, Haystacks Calhoun.
Oh, okay.
They brought in the meat scale, and they got him on, and he actually weighed 625.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that blew them away because they thought it was exaggerated by the wrestling promoters. Everything's exaggerated.
Yeah.
Well, they found out it wasn't exaggerated. He was actually bigger than, because Calhoun wasn't the type of guy who was going to get on a scale on a daily basis to see what he weighed.
Right.
Yeah, nothing special. The guy was over 600 pounds.
Wow.
So here I go from all of a sudden they were calling me the world's strongest wrestler, world's strongest this and that. All of a sudden, I fell out of grace with that promotion because Buddy Rogers had come into the area with his clan and all that kind of stuff. And without going too specifically, they started asking me to do things that I didn't believe in and would not cooperate with.
Yeah.
I had trained much too hard and too long. I wanted to have an opportunity to see what I could do as a professional, how high I could go. And what they were asking of me wouldn't have given me that opportunity at all. And so I defined about it. I said, no way. I said, I'm not going to play the game.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, who do you think you are? And so I didn't know because I was young and naive. I did not know how well connected promoters were with other promoters with certain athletic commission. And when I gave my notice and I went, they said I missed the shot, which wasn't true. And with that, they had the commission suspend me. So I was in San Francisco. And a couple of weeks I was there, it hit me there. The commissioner came over, asked for my name, says, is there Bruno Sammartino here? Yes, sir. He said, you're suspended. You cannot wrestle here. I went to Indianapolis. You're suspended. You can't wrestle here. I went to Omaha, Nebraska. You're suspended. You can't wrestle here. Well, I didn't have that kind of money.
This is when you were blackballed, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And so finally, everywhere I went, the door was slammed to my face. I made my way back to Pittsburgh. I had nothing else to do. And I would never go back to them and say, oh, I'm a defeated guy. What is it that you want of me? I'll be happy to do it. Please take me back. I was defined about that. I said, no. I said, I'll go back and be a construction worker and be home. I'll be near where my parents were living and I wanted to see them. I had my wife. I just got married, as I told you, just before I got into the business. I said, I'll work as a construction worker. I was thinking to approach the Roonies again to see if they would give me that opportunity again. But I was not going to play the game that they wanted me to play. Right. And so I was working construction. I went back to work construction.
Wow.
But one time, then they were having a wrestling show in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you remember promoting Pedro Martinez.
You've mentioned him to me before.
Yeah. Well, there was his promotion out of Buffalo, New York. They were running a show in Pittsburgh. That night after work, I went to the show because some of the guys on the card I knew, some of the wrestlers. One of them being Yukon Eric, if you ever remember that, if you remember that name. Yeah. Yukon Eric was a very nice guy, very nice guy. He said to me, Bruno, he said, are you still out of the business? Because word was out that I was out. Yeah. I said, yeah, I'm working construction here. I said, we're putting up a church. We're building a church at the time. He says to me, geez, he says, don't you want to be in the business? I says, yeah, I want to be in the business, but every door shut. I said, everywhere I've gone, I said, nothing. Yeah. He said, why don't you go to Canada? I said, I don't know anybody in Canada. He said, well, I work for promoting Frank Town. He said, he's a good guy. He says, that Toronto right now is in bad shape. The territory, the whole Ontario, it's in bad shape. They're not drawing at all. He says, and there's like 400,000 or 500,000 Italians that live in Toronto, an area. Right. He says, I bet you Frank Tani would love to have somebody that came from the old country and speaks the language and so forth. I says, oh man, I'd love the opportunity. He says, I'm going to go talk to Frank when I get back. Wow. So he had my phone number, and Frank Tani actually called me. And he didn't know me. Yeah. He said to me, I heard that Yukon has told me some good things about you. He says, you're a big guy. He says, what do you weigh? I told him at the time I was about 272, 273. And he said, and you're wrestled and you're a big weightlifter? And I said, yeah. And he said, He said, yeah, I'd like to give you a shot to come up here. You speak Italian, right? I said, yeah, I came from Italy. He said, good. But then I said to him, I said, Mr. Tunney, I said, I really would love the opportunity. I said, but I don't want to quit my job, come up to Toronto, and then maybe somebody calls you, and then you tell me to pack my bag and go home.
Right.
I says, I have to have some kind of issue, because I said, my wife's expecting. I said, and I have a job here. I said, I want to be in wrestling. I said, but I want to have an opportunity. I want to have a chance. I said, I want you to judge me if I'm okay or not, and not be influenced by outside forces. That's just what I told him. He said to me, look, he says, you come here. He says, you keep your nose clean. He says, you will have an opportunity. You will have your chance. He says, and if there's no problems, he says, you never have to worry about anybody calling me.
Wow.
He says, it's all up to you. I said, well, I said, if that's the case, I said, how soon do you want me up there? He says, I'd like you to come next week. Following week, I went to Toronto. But I'll tell you what I did, because I was becoming a little smarter now. I understood a little bit about the business. I thought I can't depend just on the promoters. I have to help me. I have to help myself promote too. So I contacted the Italian paper in Toronto, because I found out of the Italian population, it was legit. They had about 450, 500,000 Italians. So I contacted the Italian paper and I said, look, I said, you don't know me. I said, but I'm from Italy. I told them exactly where I was from. I said, I can do stuff that nobody can do. I figure, hey, if you're going to promote yourself, you got to do a little boasting.
Right.
So they said, is that right? I said, yeah. They said, who do you think you are? Another Primo Carnera? I said, I'm stronger than Primo Carnera ever was, I said. He said, really? I said, yeah, really, and I'm willing to show you. Come and see me at the Y. So they did. They came over, and that's when I took 500 pounds after warming up. Not built.
Yeah.
500 pounds for like 5 reps on the bench. I took 700 pounds after building up. I did like 4 or 5 reps, and deadlifting, and I did all kinds of feats that I was able to do. They were extremely impressed. A few days later, the sports section of the Italian paper, the headline was Il Sansone Italiano, which means the Italian Samson. And
wow.
Big story, and the story in Italian, it said that it's unbelievable how powerful this guy is. He says, my God, he's truly a Samson, blah, blah, blah. So there was an Italian television station run by a gentleman by the name of Palombo.
Okay.
And Palombo invited me to come to his television station, and he asked if I could do some feats of strength there. So I went there, and I did do some feats of strength in his show. And I'll tell you, the Italians, one thing about the Italians, they love strength. And they were impressed, and so they started coming, So all of a sudden, this territory that was dead came to life.
Wow.
And what do you think was happening that was going on my way? All of a sudden, everything is going good. Frank Tunney's TV went all over Canada. He's getting requests from Winnipeg, from Calgary, for dates on me. So Frank talked to me about it, and I said, hey, you're the boss, So I started going to all these different places. I went to Montreal, all over Quebec. I'm doing good, but I'm finding out that the New York area now is not doing quite as well. They're going down pretty bad. And Buddy Rogers, he was the king, but he was taking the territory in a very negative area.
Yeah.
And so after I was in Canada for about a year and a half, and I got a phone call that Vince wanted to talk to me. McMahon wanted to talk to me. Long story short, we finally connected, and he said, you belong in New York. I said, I was in New York. I said, I don't have too many pleasant memories of that. I said, well, that's the past. He said, this will be the future. Anyway, I said, no, I don't think so. I said, I'm very happy over here that I'm being treated well and I like it. And he said, well, I'll give you a guarantee. It's so much money a week guaranteed. I said, no. So finally, after 2-3 different conversations, well, what's it going to take to bring you back here? I says, put me in the ring with Rogers for the title. Well, no, because Rogers and I never cared for each other. It was just a thing that we just never cared for each other. But long story short, eventually they give in to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we went, and I wrestled Rogers. Of course, I became the champion.
Right.
And then, well, you know the rest of the story.
Yeah. Without digressing too much, just following up a little bit on that Haystacks Calhoun match, was that, do you think, the turning point in your career from being Bruno Sammartino to now being the superstar Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden?
No, because at that moment I became like a superstar. But then what they did, because for example, I was given my notice I was going to leave, you know, because of what they were doing, all that. They put me in the garden a couple of times after that, and I couldn't beat anybody.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't beat anybody. And so all of a sudden they saw this, but then they seen us. No, when I left, you know, they saw to it that I wasn't
Gotcha.
any kind of a big deal at all.
Gotcha. Now, the story is infamous about Buddy Rogers claiming that he had a heart attack that night. How do you respond to that story?
It was the biggest night. Everybody of that time knew it was a joke. Here, I'll tell you how it came about. I'll tell you exactly how it came about. Buddy Rogers was the champion. And despite these people write letters and newsletters and stuff, because I don't think they know, some of the times they don't know what they're talking about. The territory was dead. Yeah. Madison Square Garden, because Vince used to put so much emphasis on it, never completely died. It would have its ups and downs, okay? But the rest of the territory during Buddy Rogers, it was dead. I mean, it was bad, and they were in bad shape. Buddy Rogers went to Pittsburgh. I forget who he was wrestling that night. And when he came in there with a big cigar, the typical Buddy Rogers strut, he looked at that arena, and there was nobody in it. He saw that, and he thought, because you have to understand, in my day, you got paid according to the gate. Okay. There was no pay-per-view. There were no merchandising. You strictly got paid by the gate. When he saw what a disaster Pittsburgh was that night, and I saw the show because I was home on that particular day, and I went to the arena.
Oh, okay.
And it was, nothing. It was dead. I don't think there was more than 1,500 people in an arena that holds 19,000.
Wow.
And so Buddy saw that. He went out and looked at it, and he probably, I'm just assuming this, he probably thought, what's the sense? I'm not going to go in there and beat up on my body. There's nothing there, you know. So to get out of the match, which Buddy was good to come up with gimmicks, he said, geez, he says to you have to get examined every night. You know, you got a state athletic commission now. Get examined, and he says, geez, I'm feeling some pains in my chest. He says, what do you think it is, Doc? The doctor said, I don't know. But the doctor told the state athletic commission, he says, this guy's complaining about chest pains. Well, immediately, his name was Sullivan. Immediately, this Commissioner Sullivan says, well, he ain't wrestling, he says, because I want to find I don't want the guy to go in there if there's a health problem. So Buddy couldn't wrestle that night. But what he didn't expect was, he didn't get out of that show that night. The commissioner sent word to report this to the head commission in New York and whatever. And so the word was out that this guy had been canceled out of Pittsburgh, was canceled out because he was experiencing some problems. Yeah. So he couldn't wrestle. His license was suspended. McMahon was furious. They put him in a hospital in Washington, D.C. to have him totally examined. Came out with a clean bill of health. Okay? And so he was relicensed. And ice wrestling all over again. He was wrestling daily, like everybody else did. When I wrestled him, he had been wrestling every day. So they said that he said this after the match of 48 seconds. Somebody asked him at a banquet. They says to him, "How did you get beat so quick by Bruno? 48 seconds." He says, "Well," he said, "people didn't know." He said, "But I had a heart attack and I was in the hospital, and they literally took me with a stretcher and took me to the garden." He says, "That's how bad in shape I was." And from that, the stories got out all over that Roger had a heart attack. Yeah. And that those are the conditions he went through. It was such nonsense. He was wrestling every day up to that day, and he wrestled after that. He continued to wrestle. So to people who even write about saying, well, there must have been some death, they just don't have a clue what they're talking about, because all the guys that were around at the time, they saw Rogers wrestle every day, and he was wrestling after not in New York, because after I beat him, He was out, and he went to work for the Sheik in Detroit.
Oh, okay.
So he continued to wrestle.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, during your first title reign, who were some of your favorite opponents and why?
Oh, well. Monsoon was amazing. I don't know if a lot of fans would realize how amazing he was. And here's why I'm getting at. He weighed 410, 420 pounds. For a guy to be 410, 420 pounds and to be able to move as good as he did, to have the stamina to go. You know, one time I wrestled him for 90 minutes in Madison Square Garden. 90 minutes from 9:30 to 11 o'clock. To curfew we went. And I'll tell you what's even more amazing than that. I cracked 2 of his ribs within the first 10 minutes of the match. That's no lie.
Wow.
And that's very painful.
Yeah.
And he went on with the match. You know, he was for a guy 410, 420 pounds, he was agile. He could move in that ring, strong. So he stood out. Then people like Kowalski. Kowalski was like not that you saw the greatest of wrestling, but you saw action because he was such a tremendously conditioned guy. And he went and he went. There was no letting up with Kowalski. You better be in shape if you wrestle Killer
He
Kowalski.
speaks very highly of your series of matches together. He says you guys used to just go, go, go.
Go, go, go.
Yeah.
It was a challenge every time because I respected him so much for his dedication of being in shape. See, I loved people who were dedicated enough to work hard to be the best they could be. Kowalski was never not in tip-top shape. Never.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, I wanted to be every bit as tip-top shape as he was. Because I respected him so much. So when we went in that ring, I don't care if the match was 1 hour long, if it was 30 minutes long, or if it was 20 minutes long. It was the same tempo.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, we kept going because, and sometimes we'd have the people standing up. You know, Don Leo Jonathan, amazing guy. For a guy 6'6", 320 pounds, whatever he was, the way he could move, he was so agile and quick. Big Bill Miller, he wasn't like Jonathan in that sense, but what a wrestler and what a big man he was.
Yeah.
Koloff, I had great matches with Ivan Koloff. There were so many guys from that era that I just thought were great, you know. And
yeah. Now, your travel schedule as champion during your first reign, did it come to a point where you just burned out and that you just wanted to go home and spend some time at home?
For the 8 years, or almost 8 years, whatever, I've been challenged on the time because I've said 12 years. You know what I go by? I go by 63 to 71 and 73 to 74.
Right.
If you asked me which month I lost the title, I couldn't even tell you. I don't keep it. So I said, no, he wasn't champion for 12 years. Somebody wrote, says he was champion for, I think they said 11 years and 5 months or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Oh, but excuse me, I'm a big liar. The facts are that the 8 years, okay, it was grueling. First of all, I was extremely grateful to get the title because it told me that I'm up there, I'm on top.
Sure.
But now it was a little scary too, because am I on top and be successful, or am I going to fall on my face where people don't buy tickets to see me? Then what am I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to get you out of there in a hurry, you know?
Right.
So I was concerned about that, how people would receive me, you know? But once I was convinced that people did accept me and I was doing great. I was happy, extremely happy. But unfortunately, when you go 6 and 7 days a week, I used to wrestle 7 days a week, 2 weeks out of the month. And the other 2 weeks, I'd go 6 days a week. And the reason being, because when I left Canada, I promised Frank Tunney that I would come in for him for the Maple Leaf Garden every other Sunday.
Wow.
He had been good to me. And I said, to me, the sacrifice was a big sacrifice because I wanted to be home. I had a kid now. My wife, my parents were getting up there in age. I wanted to be home desperately. Yeah. But
Sundays were your days off, right?
Excuse me?
Sundays would have been your days off.
Sundays would have been my days off.
Right.
So I would have had 4 days a month.
Yeah.
Instead, I got 2 days a month. But I wanted to keep my word with Frank because Frank gave me my break. Frank gave me an opportunity when I was out of opportunities. So, I appreciated it. But what happens, though, when you're going at that rate of 6 and 7 days a week, and you're traveling like we did and by car a lot. Give you an example. We had live TV in those days. You'd go to Bangor, Maine, okay, on Wednesday. Thursday, we have live TV out of Washington, D.C. So you're driving from Bangor, Maine, drive all the way to Washington, D.C., wrestle for TV that evening, and then drive 250 miles to New York because we had Sunnyside Gardens the next day. That was live TV as well.
Wow.
I mean, this is the kind of schedule yet. So what happens, and then you're training. I used to get up early in the morning to train because I never want to let myself, out of shape.
Right.
It was tough. It was tough on your body. And then you'd get little injuries here and there, no time off to recoup. So you're going in there injured. And sometimes when you're injured and you keep pounding your body, the injuries get bigger. And I was as lucky as I've been in this business, but I was also a little unlucky because I suffered a couple serious back injuries early on in the 60s. And it was difficult because I had to keep going on that crazy schedule every day. And my back, I used to sometimes be under the shower with this hot waters I could take for like 15, 20 minutes. And then just 2 minutes before I go in the ring, I would dry up real quick, put on the tights and run into the ring and with the hope that, that loosened up and I could perform. But it was hard. And so what happened after 7 years or they're close by, I just felt like I couldn't take it anymore. I was the type of guy who wouldn't even take an aspirin for pain or anything because I didn't believe in that. I believed that I have to be aware of my body, what hurts, and because I have to protect it the best way I can when I'm in there. And if you numb that armed area, what you're doing is you're making your injuries even a lot worse because you're not protecting anyway, because you're not feeling it at the time. But afterwards, you're going to feel it even more.
Yeah.
And I was feeling plenty more as it was without masking that problem, So I finally reached a point where I just didn't feel. The most important thing to me was I never lost the fact that without the fans, you're nothing, you're nobody. The fans make you because if they don't come, you're out of there. Okay? So to me, it was important. The most important was to give everything you had because they're the ones who support you and you owe it to them. I believed that in my heart and soul. And when I felt that because of the injuries that were piling up, I couldn't be what I felt that I was anymore. I couldn't be that. I was hurting too much. I said, it's time for me to move on for a while, not to retire. They said that I had retired and then I never retired. I just needed a break. So that's when I am probably I say, because I don't know the history of every champion.
Yeah.
But I am probably the only guy on 2 different occasions who chose to get out of that championship situation.
Right.
And not be pushed out because I wasn't wanted anymore as a champion. But I just felt that it was best all the way around for the fans, even though the fans were still coming out by the groves, But I knew in my heart that I couldn't be what I felt that I was.
Yeah. Okay.
So I told McMahon that I needed to do something about my body, see what I could do, what kind of rest or what kind of therapy that I could take. And he stalled and he kept stalling. And finally I got angry and I said, look, I'm going to get out for a while. I says, I have to get out for a while. And finally, he had to give in.
Right.
So I got out. And I did for about a couple months. I was going to take therapy and all that stuff. I actually started feeling a lot better. I'm working out a lot better. And it was at this point that I really fell in love with the business again. And why? Because I would go to St. Louis, for example, for Sam Marshnick, and I would take on a couple of matches. Come home, be off for 5 days. I wouldn't accept too many matches. Then the Bruiser and I teamed up in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the Midwest and Dick and I would be tag team partners. And we would wrestle Chicago, Indianapolis, different places. Maybe 3 matches, 4 matches. Come home for a week, nothing.
Yeah.
Go to Japan, because Bob would always call me. Go to Japan for 2 weeks. I'd come home and be 10 days off. I thought, man, this is great. I went for Paul Bosch for Texas for a couple of matches. I come home. So I thought, this is great. And this is the way I want it. Vince McMahon would call me up once in a while because Boston was way down. he'd say to me, Bruno, please come over and give me a couple of shots in Boston. So I'd go to Boston for him and have a couple of matches. I was lucky because then the fans missed me because every time I went, it would be a sellout.
Right.
Then they'd tell me if I could give a lift to Philadelphia or someplace, and I would accommodate them, well, why not?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I had it made because I'm wrestling, but I'm home. I'm home with my family. I'm spending time with my mom and dad. They were way up there in age. I got my wife. I'm seeing my little kid playing a little league, stuff like this. So I'm happy. And then McMahon calls me up, senior. He said to me, Bruno, he said, please, you got to come back. He says, I said, I'll come back the way I have been. You want me for Pittsburgh? You want me for Philadelphia? A garden once in a while? I said, but that's it. And he kept calling me. So then I met with him and his son, the big guy now that's running the show.
Junior.
Vince McMahon Jr.
Yeah. We
met at an airport. Vince McMahon said to me, Bruno, he says, look, come back for 1 year. That's all I'm asking for, 1 year. He says, till we get somebody prepped up that can fit that spot and be successful for the whole territory. So I said, Vince, I've been coming to Boston. He says, no. He says, I need you for all the big clubs. It's just for 1 year. For 1 year. He says, and I'll make you a promise. He says, right now, how often are you, if averaging out, 2-3 times a week? I said, yeah. He says, we'll keep it at 2-3 times a week. You just wrestle the major clubs for 1 year, and then we'll have somebody. Well, 1 year went to 2. 2 years went to 3, and then on the 4th year, if you remember, I broke my neck.
Right.
And then I was mad at myself. I thought, why do I ever allow them to talk me from 1 to 2 to 3 and not to 4? I was at the hospital, and they had that halo thing, on my neck. And now what happened? The match between, we made a challenge to Muhammad Ali, but they wanted $6 million. Vince McMahon tried to get the other promoters all to pitch in to accommodate this guy because we felt that if I took him on, it would be a good thing for wrestling. Because frankly, I didn't see a problem with taking on a guy, a boxer, and I still don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't at all. But they couldn't come up with the money. The other promoters, there's a lot of jealousy with these promoters. They got along and they fought too. And they don't want to see McMahon have this success of promoting this thing. That's what I believe, because they wouldn't come through. The Japanese promoters heard about this challenge and everything else, and they were powerful, because I made 20 tours in Japan. I know the money that the organizations that were behind that. They said, well, we'll come up with the $6 million for this guy, and they made the match with Inoki. But unfortunately, you see, Inoki was pretty big in Japan, but no place else. So when they made the match between Ali and Inoki, Vince McMahon got together with Bob Arum, the boxing promoter, and they were going to do the closed circuit.
Right.
And Vince McMahon committed to X amount of dollars, which I don't know, I never got that figure, for the closed circuit, okay? For the whole Northeast. What happens? The match is made, and it's a disaster. I don't know if you heard about it or what you know about it. It was a disaster.
Yes.
They couldn't give away a ticket, much sell it. Vince panics. Now, I'm in the hospital with my broken neck after my match with Stan Hansen, remember? And Vince calls me at the hospital. He says to me, Bruno, I got to make a return match between you and Stan Hansen. He says, because this thing ain't going nowhere. I said, Vince, I'm in the hospital. I said, how can I talk about a match? They had these bolts, on my body here and like that, I said, he says, Bruno, I said, besides, it's too early to tell. How do you know it's going to do? He says, Bruno, the match has been made. He says, even though it's 3 months down the road, whatever it was, I forget, 2.5 months. He says, ain't nothing moving, nothing. He says, if this thing was going to have any life, the beginning would have shown it. Would have shown the interest in the beginning. He says, it's dead. He says, if we don't make this match, he says, we're dead. He says, we will be in a financial crisis. I said, but how can I talk about a match with the situation I'm in? Right. He says, we'll work it out to where you'll be protected. You won't get hurt. We'll work. I said, Vince. Anyway, the phone, I'm not exaggerating, was ringing at that hospital almost daily. In fact, my doctor's name was Louis Silvertrees. he heard from a nurse that these phone calls, because I couldn't pick up the phone. The nurse would put the phone on. And she told him, Dr. Civitrice, about these calls. And Civitrice, I guess, told her, let me know the next time he gets that call. So they called him. He came over and he took the phone off the girl. And he said, Mr. McMahon, he says, let me say something to you in layman's language or something like that. He says, this guy's suffering from a broken neck. We don't know if he's going to be 100% after this injury. He said, you want to talk about a wrestling match? He says, get real, more or less. And he put the phone down. Well, the next time I talk to Vince, he says to me, geez, don't put that guy down. Long story short, I get out of the hospital after about a month, and whatever time I was there. I'm at home, and now they have what they call the Miami brace. It was a brace that they had me under the neck here and on the side of my head, the brace, and to my waist here. And when I come home, I was like, when my wife would be out shopping or something, because if she saw me, she'd die. I'd go down and see if I could start a little light workout or something, trying to get my body some kind of tone.
Yeah.
To see if I could help out, because he made it sound like this could be bankruptcy because he committed so much finances to the closed circuit.
Wow.
Anyway, long story short, he kept talking to me. He says to me, Bruno, he says, we got it. He says, believe me, he says, if we don't make this match, finally I said, go ahead. But the question was, how am I going to do this? So they made the match. And that's the great thing, is when they made the match, all the people knowing that I was okay, that I was going to come back and wrestle the guy that broke my neck, immediately the thing took off. So the only success the Muhammad Ali and Aki match was in the closed circuit was in the Northeast. I don't know. Were you around then? I don't know.
No, I think I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but if you heard anything,
but I know the legend of the match.
Sold out all the arena, sold out everywhere. But the thing was, the people want to see me get revenge on Stan Hansen, who broke my neck, because every place else, not only in this country but around the world, that thing turned out to be the biggest disaster. And unfortunately for the whole thing, why it was a shame, because had that thing been better, and if it had been a little more successful, there could have been others in the future that could have been very beneficial. Yeah. But unfortunately, not only was it a disaster financially, a horrible disaster, but the match itself was a disaster. Yeah. It was, did you ever see the match?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It was a disaster. Disaster. And it killed any future, possibilities for anything like that. Yeah. But anyway, now the idea was, how do you get out of this thing? So I went in the ring first. When Hansen came in, he was getting in the ring, and I kicked him a few times. He started bleeding, and the referee stops the match. And believe it or not, the fans didn't get mad, nothing. They just wanted to see this guy get nailed. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Get your revenge.
Yeah. So what we have, I think 30-some thousand people and they went crazy, and we built it out. Wow. We pulled the thing out, and so instead of financial disaster, because Vince was only involved in the Northeast, the Bostons, the Pittsburghs, the Philadelphias, all the arena there, and so they made out very well.
Wow. Speaking of of the match when Ivan Koloff defeated you for the title. Urban legend is that the building was so silent that they were so shocked and surprised that you apparently thought you lost your hearing. Is that true?
That's an absolute truth. What happened was, first of all, we had a great match. I don't know if you ever saw that on film. For two big guys, we were moving like featherweights in there. We were doing a lot of great arm dragging and different like that. And when the finale came, Koloff caught me as I was coming off of the ropes. He caught me with a knee to the stomach, and then he picked me up and he gave me a big body slam. He immediately ran up the top rope, and he came flying off with his 290-pound body weight, and he came down with a knee drop on my neck. Well, he hit me hard. He really did. But then it was this dead silence, and I really thought that the blow that I took did something to me, because I'm expecting the boos. Yeah. Because, here's this bad Russian. He beats me. And I've been the fan favorite now for all these years, right? 8 straight years. So I thought, my God, what happened? I can't hear nothing. But then and I'm laying there in the ring. Arnold Skolin came over and he said to me, Bruno, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I heard him perfectly. I heard him so clear. I thought, what the heck's going on? So slowly I get myself up, still silence it can be, and I'm still so confused. I don't understand what's going on. What is happening? But as I make my way finally out of the ring, and I'm starting to walk toward the garden, the dugout to get into the garden, I actually heard people, tears, and some of them say, Bruno, we still love you. You'll always be number one, and this and that. And I saw some women crying. Oh my God, that touched me so deeply. I can't tell you. When I went in the dressing room, I was very depressed. Mm-hmm. I thought I was glad to get this load off of my back, being champion, But my God, I didn't know that the fans were going to feel that. I didn't expect that. I thought there'd be a lot of boos, because Koloff beat me and they're going to boo him, and so forth. And who knows, maybe have a good security to get him out of there, stuff like that. But I never expected what happened. It was such a shocker. And it really did. It made me feel bad because when I was in the dressing room, I said, boy, I really let these people down.
Wow.
I didn't know that it was going to be like that,
Wow. Now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you did wrestle Luthez in Canada?
Yes.
Yeah. What are your memories of wrestling Luthez?
I thought it was a good match.
Yeah.
I thought we had a very good match, as a matter of fact. I don't know what to say about it other than I thought the match was very good. Mm-hmm. I heard some things about it years later, kind of surprised me, what I heard. Somebody said that Luthez said that...
Well, that's my next question. I asked you this before,
okay.
and let me, and we've talked about this before, but let's talk about this, in this forum. Luthez, when he wrote his book, he told a story in his book that you guys were going to, unify the belts at one point.
Oh, that's okay.
He says in his book, the deal fell through because he wanted too much money.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true. Maybe he believes that. I don't know. Yeah. But I know for a fact that that's absolutely not true. I'll tell you why the thing didn't go off. It went off because of me that the thing didn't go. And I'll tell you why. When Vince McMahon and Tootsmond were meeting with Sam Mushnick and Bobby Bronze, I think was the other party, and it may have been somebody else, because I was never in any of those meetings and I was never included in any of it. And so I didn't always know who was all. I did hear that Thez was in one or two of those meetings. Mm-hmm. I was never invited. I knew nothing. Okay. But I did know that there was something going on about unifying the belt, unifying the title. And you see, and the reason why this was coming about, by the way, which is important that maybe people in Europe didn't know, was that NWA had been the number one organization for a long time. But the WWF all of a sudden got so big that here I'm in demand in Japan, in Australia, I toured South America, and it became the magazines, there were like 9 magazines, mostly out of New York, and I'm on the cover of 6 and 7 of them, and everything was the WWF World Champion. So that we became actually the number one organization, and we were the biggest at the time. So I think that had something to do why the agreement unification as far as the NWA goes. Tootsmond was never for it, but Vince McMahon was for it, okay? Mm. He thought it'd be okay. In his heart, he believed it would probably be a good thing. And I don't know, maybe it was. But what happened was then that I was never in any of these meetings, and a gentleman named Phil Zacco, who was part of that organization with McMahon and Tootsmond and that, he wasn't a partner, but he was like a local promoter for them, and he did, I think, some of the accounting work for them, but he was part of the organization. Okay. He was a good guy, Phil. I liked Phil Zacco, and Phil Zacco said to me, because I used to complain to Phil sometimes, we'd get together. Phil was a Syrian. He had his background from Syria. Okay. So he felt that I was a foreigner. We were both foreigners, so we had something in common here. Yeah. And so he felt an attachment, and we were friends. And he said to me, he says, "Kid, you always, with the cigar, he says, listen, kid," he says, "I got something to tell you." He says, "You know that there's a lot of talk going on about unifying title." He says, I told Vince and Toots that they should talk to you about it too. He says, because right now, he says, what they're talking about that they're having a problem with, he said, Sam Mushnick feels that they have to have something like 17 dates on the champion to accommodate places with the NWA. Vince feels that because the Northeast got the most major arenas, he feels that he needs like 18 days or something. And he says, and this is a stumbling block because they're talking about like a 35, 36 day date. There's only 30 days or 31 days in a month.
Right.
So he said to me, he says, they might come up with a deal here. He says, and then they're going to expect you to go along. And it means, kid, he says, you don't ever see your family now. You won't see them at all because it'll mean every day, Sundays and everything included. So then I went to, on a Thursday when we can do the live TV out of Washington. I came in early that day. I came in from wherever, I don't remember. And I had a meeting with Toots and Vince and Willie Gilzenberg, I beg your pardon. He was there too. And I said, look, I just want to make something clear. I understand about these meetings that are being held. I said, and I understand too, I said that the question is who gets what days, whatever. I says, and I don't care about that. I said, that's between you people, you and the NWA people. I said, to work out the dates. I said, but let me be clear about one thing. I says, I've been getting 2 days out of the month to see my family. I says, that's not good enough. I said, I want 4 days. Because I had spoken to Frank Tani and I told him of my dilemma. And Frank Tani said, I understand. He says, it's okay. He says, you don't have to come here every couple of weeks. So I said, so I'm clear for 4 days. I said, I don't care how you guys work out these the remaining days. I said, but Sundays are mine for my family. I said that Toots Mond immediately spoke up and he said, see, Vince, he says, why do you want any part of that? He says, we're doing so good. He says, the only reason why they want to unite is because they're not doing as good. They got an old champion who's not drawing anywhere anymore. Right. He said, why in the world are you even thinking that? He says, how are you going to get what with the 26 days? 26 days, we're talking 13 days each, and they're talking 18 and 17,
Yeah.
So I found out, and I said my piece, I made it very clear, and I left. And then I found out that the Toots and Vince and Gilzenberg, and because Phil Zacco told me about it, they met, and they said, well, we're not going to sacrifice our major clubs because we have more major clubs than any other territory for this if we're not going to have Bruno to work our club. So that killed the deal. That's what killed the deal. I heard stories later. One was that Luthez wanted the Dick Hutton to be the champion. Another one I heard that he wanted $100,000 down now. Another one, what was another story that I heard about that? Was that Toots Mond didn't like Luthez and Luthez didn't like Toots Mond, and that's what broke the thing up. I'm sorry, it's all nonsense because I know that the stumbling block was the dates. Who was going to get how many dates? And when I took away from them those 4 Sundays, that's what killed the deal. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Now, you touched on this earlier. What are your memories of going over to Japan and wrestling for and against Baba?
Well, I wrestled Baba. Every time I toured Japan, I had to wrestle Baba. Baba, for a tall, big guy that he was, I don't know his exact height. He used to say he was 7 foot tall. I don't know if he was exactly 7, but he was very, I'll tell you what, next to me, he looked like he was 7 foot tall. I'm not going to tell you that I had the kind of matches with Baba that I would have had, let's say, with Koloff or with Kowalski or with, because it was different, this is Japan. But I'll have to say that I liked wrestling Shohan Baba. I think for a big man that he was in height and all that, I think that he was a durable guy. I wrestled him an hour-long match, and he was there for the whole hour, boy, no question about it. I knew in my mind that when I go to Japan, that's going to be the matches I'm mostly going to be with Baba. I respected him tremendously. I think he was a great guy. Honestly, I'm being very honest with you. I respected him. I liked him tremendously. But am I going to tell you that did I have as good a match with Shohei Baba as I would with Koloff or with Tanaka or with Kowalski or a lot of Jonathan. I don't think I could go that far and say that.
Now, I saw an interview that you did on Japanese TV during the feud, and it looked like you were almost the heel over there. It looked like that you're cutting. Were you the heel in that series over there, or?
Well, remember this. Baba was huge in Japan.
Yeah.
And they wanted, because of the publicity on me was kind of a popular guy type thing, in order to make I had somebody, one of the promoters, or whatever he was. I never knew who was who in Japan.
Yeah.
But one of these people that was always there, and they told me that, they wanted me to be a little more aggressive with my interviews because, after all, they said that Baba is the hero in Japan. And they wanted me to be a little bit more aggressive in the way I spoke about it. So I did kind of an arrogant interview about that, I'm going to show this guy who's boss more. I don't remember the words.
It was something like that I saw.
I'm just saying something to that effect. Yeah, and I did speak like that. But basically, in the ring, we had the same kind of match. It wasn't that different as far as what I did,
Yeah. Now, once Vince Sr. started to put a deal together with New Japan, what kind of pressures were put on you to do New Japan?
Yeah, that was, and let me make it clear that I did understand McMahon's position. We're talking about McMahon Sr., of course.
Right.
I want people to understand that. I understood his position. He felt that because he was not dealing with that organization, which its head was Antonio Inoki, that I should be involved in that. But I but I made it clear to McMahon that I had been involved with the other organization, which Baba, which it was the top guy, okay? And I said that I had given my word to that organization because they wanted me to keep coming for them as time went on. I gave them my word that I absolutely would. I said, so Vince, I said, you made your deal with this other organization way after. I said, I have to keep my word with this organization. Well, and I understand how uncomfortable it made it for him.
Yeah.
Because I think that those promoters, and I don't know what all transpired, how would I know?
Right.
But I think that no question that they probably bothered him about it. They said, Jay, we're doing business with you. You're the promoter, and this guy's coming with our opposition.
Yeah.
And Vince, I have to give credit, even though he talked to me a number of times about it, but he knew very well where I stood, and we never came to bitter fights or anger about it,
Yeah.
I just held my ground, and he understood. I don't know if he understood. Like I said, we didn't fight over it.
Yeah.
But I absolutely wasn't going to switch over. So yeah, it had to be very uncomfortable for him, and I could understand that.
Yeah.
But I like to think of myself as a man of my word too, and I had committed to that organization way before Vince got together with the other organization.
Yeah.
And so that was the story there.
In the 1970s, who did you like to travel with? Who were your favorite traveling partners?
I didn't travel with anybody.
You traveled by yourself?
Are you talking about worldwide or here?
Like when you would be on the road in the area with the WWF.
Oh, it was Arnold Skoland and
Okay.
I traveled a lot together, yeah.
Oh.
Sometimes Dominic DeNucci or
Okay.
Antonio Pugliese.
Okay. What do you remember about Arnold since he just passed away?
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate and it saddened me, of course. But Arnie and I kind of hit it off good from the very beginning. When I first started, I met Arnie. I met Arnie when I was in Washington when Rudy Miller brought me in. Right at that time, I met Arnold.
Right.
And Arnold was always very nice with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a very likable guy, and I liked him. Now, a lot of people, the misconception here is that Arnold was my manager. And I think people don't understand that you didn't have a manager. He wasn't the manager in the sense that he took care of any of my business.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was no such a thing as a manager like that. But he was a manager in the sense that he would appear with me in the ring. He'd come to my, walk in the ring with me, and people said it's Bruno's manager, which was great because, I liked Arnold and we got along very, very well. And I think it was good because as he got older, because Arnie was a good wrestler, but as he got older and he wrestled less and less, he had this job of being Bruno's road manager. Now, of course, he didn't travel with me all over.
Right.
Just whether it was for New York, Baltimore, Washington, let's say Boston, Connecticut, New Jersey, those areas. But then when I went outside of those areas, I always went by myself.
Yeah.
I never traveled with anybody. Well, let me take it back. I did travel with Dominic a couple of times to Japan.
Oh, okay.
Because I talked to the promoters that I liked it. The Dominic wanted to go to Japan, and I arranged for him to go. And Dominic was a good friend. We come from the same neck of the wood in the old country. We had a lot in common. It helped the trip, for us to let's talk about the old country or talk about wrestling, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And Dominic and I remain very, very good friends to this day. We don't live too far away from each other.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, Dusty Rhodes, in his book, he talks about, he claims he was more popular than you are in New York. And he tells a story in his book that he claims the two of you were at a nightclub after a wrestling match at Madison Square Garden, and he was surrounded by a mob of people and you had nobody around you. They were all flocking to him for autographs.
Well, but he said that, huh?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that because it's kind of ridiculous. Dusty Rhodes, I remember McMahon would bring him in because Eddie Graham or Crockett, whichever territory was in, they would ask if he would use him for a few shows, so they could publicize wherever he was working. Say he's new Madison Square Garden. They did that with Flair in the early days, man. But what the fans didn't know was that Ric Flair was wrestling Pete Sanchez. Nothing against Pete Sanchez, a wonderful fellow, but strictly preliminary. You know what I mean? Because he, for all the respect to Flair, but he didn't mean anything in New York at that time. And so Dusty was okay for a show or two. But he was not a guy that wrestled the territory full time. Frankly, I think he would have had a difficult time because people didn't see him as a, rugged tough, because he was, what he's built like. So for him to say that, I would say that he either had some nice dreams for himself or I don't know what, because that's sheer nonsense.
Yeah. And were you ever at any clubs with him after the shows?
Never hung out with Rhodes, not only in that New York area, but any place else in the country. I never palled out with the guy. Yeah. I saw him at an arena here and there, maybe when he came here for a shot or two, or in Florida. I think I saw him one time. There may have been someplace else, I don't know. But no, I never was out with Dusty Rhodes. Wow. Never.
Wow. Memories of the series of matches you had with Bruiser Brody?
Well, Bruiser Brody, he was an impressive-looking guy, big guy. I wrestled him a number of times. I even wrestled him in Madison Square Garden. Right. Yeah, I respected him because he looked great, so I felt he must have worked out pretty good. I didn't know him all that well. I can't give you too much on him because I never got very close to anybody. Sure. But as far as his in the ring, he was impressive looking guy. He was a 300-pounder, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and he was well put together, strong, rugged. He was a brawler, so to speak. And I thought that I thought we did okay together. We drew well, and I thought we had very respectable matches. Yeah. I don't remember anything negative about the guy. I felt terrible when I heard what happened to him. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. That bothered me a lot. I thought, my God, how could something like that happen? Yeah. He was a young guy. I think he was only in his 30s.
Had a family.
And the biggest tragedy of all, that case, as far as I know, it never got resolved.
You're correct. It's still open.
That blew me away.
Yeah.
I felt very, very sad when I got that, because I respected Bruiser Brody. I wrestled him a lot of times. Like I said, I never got too close to him to say that I knew him so well personally, because you hung out with him. I didn't know him that way. Right. But I knew him from, wrestling him and all that. And I know, what kind of a guy he was in the ring. He's a hard worker. Yeah. He looked like he must have worked out a good bit because he was always, in good shape. Yeah. I had great respect for him, and it's just such a tragic that something like that happened. And worst of all, there's been no justice.
one of your great foes, Bill Watts, that you had many matches with. Were you surprised at how much success he had as a promoter after he got out of the ring?
Well, no, I don't think I was surprised because, he was in the business as a wrestler for all those years. And I think that he was a guy, he was a student of the game. I think he paid attention to what was going on, picking up different promotions that he wrestled for. Besides wrestling here in the Northeast, he wrestled at other areas as well.
Right.
And I think he was the type of guy who paid attention to what was going on. Some guys have that knack to learn from different things, so that if they're ever put in that position, they take bits and pieces, whatever, and they learned a lot, and they've seen what they think works, what it doesn't work, and they have ideas that they get from all these different experiences. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I had spectator sports in the tri-state area between part of Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. And you put your experiences on the road together. Now, some people can do that well. Some other people, for some reason, they can't. It's just like you have great baseball players.
Right.
Some of them can learn the game well to be able to manage it. Some guys may be good players, but they can never be managers. Bill Watts studied the game, and it was obvious that he learned a lot because he became a very successful promoter as well.
Wow.
He's a very intelligent guy.
Yeah. Something that I think a lot of the fans and people watching might find rather interesting is that you used to socialize with the Rat Pack back in the day. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, one day I'm in Madison Square Garden, and a guard, came over to the room and says to me, "Hey, Bruno," he says, "Jilly's out there, would like to meet you." So I said, "Who's Jilly?" I didn't know the name. That name didn't mean anything to me. He says, I said, "Jilly, who's Jilly?" "Jilly Rizzo." What's the matter with you? Don't you know Jilly Rizzo? Well, I didn't know who Jilly Rizzo was. But I came out because I often would get called to come out to meet somebody, and I would never refuse that. So I came out, and I seen this well-distinguished looking guy, well-dressed, he looked like a somebody, And I came out, and I was introduced to Jilly, and we shook hands, and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And he said to me, "Hey," he said, "I've been watching you." He says, "You're great." He says, "Where you from in Italy?" And I told him. He says, "Listen, I have a club here. It's called Julie's." He says, "I'd like you to come tonight." He says, "There's going to be some nice people there I'd like you to meet." And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, he says, "Oh, please." He says, "I'll provide transportation." He says, "Well, I'll stay here till after the show." He says, "Get a bite to eat." He says, "Meet some people." He says, it's on 57th Street. So I thought, I really didn't have any plans that night. So I says, "Well, okay." So after I got through, he had a car waiting out there, and we went there. And I saw, this club. I seen some celebrities in there. Well, as time went on, I find out that this was Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Peter Lawford. I met actors like Richard Conte be there. And then I met a lot of other comedians, Rickles, Joey Bishop. My goodness, they all came there. And then I found out later that there were even some other heavyweights that came there, like I met Sam Giancana, and I didn't have a clue who he was.
Wow.
Didn't have a clue. I was such a naive young guy in those days. I was introduced with him. He was with the McGuire sister, one of the Dorothy or somebody. McGuire.
I know who you're talking about.
She was a very pretty girl. And I said to her, "Wow, Miss McGuire," I said, "My wife and I saw you at the Holiday House in Pittsburgh." And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, "Gee, I wonder what she sees in this guy." It didn't look like much to me. I found out years later who Sam Giancana was. I thought, "Oh my God."
Did you ever meet Marilyn during those days? Marilyn Monroe?
No. I met a lot. I met who were some of the females singers like Sarah Vaughan and Margaret. Who am I thinking? I can't even. It's not terrible. I can't think of all the names. But I met quite a few. Tony Bennett used to come there a good bit. I met Pat Cooper, the comedian, used to come there. Pat Henry used to be there all the time. Joey Lewis, remember the old time comedian Joey Lewis? He used to always be there.
Yeah.
You name them all the politicians, a lot of the heavyweights, the athletes. You'd see Mickey Mantle there with the Whitey Ford and Joe Pepitone and Joe Namath used to come in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you know, it was movie stars, comedians, politicians, some other heavyweights of sorts.
Right.
They were all, there was all a hangout there. But Jilly, I have to tell you, was great with me. I knew him for about 18 years. I guess how I got to know people like Sinatra, and that's how I got to meet that whole gang.
Yeah.
Through Jilly, you know, and I got to meet him and hang out with him a little bit at Jilly's, of course, not outside there. But, you know, the place would be closed and we'd be there sometimes till 6, 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
That way, hang out. But I never, like, outside of Jilly's ever went anywhere with any of these people, no.
Yeah, yeah. What do you talked a little bit about him during the 70s. What do you remember about Vince Jr. when Dad was still in charge and everything?
Well, Vince Jr., when Rocca, remember Argentina Rocca,
Mm-hmm.
when he passed away, unfortunately, he died young. He had been doing some color with McMahon. And when he passed on, he died, needed a replacement. I actually told, I think, Vince Sr., I said, gee, I'd like to do that.
Oh, okay.
I really think I'd like that. I wanted to get some experience with that, and I thought I'd like to do that. I'd seen it, and I thought I could do it. To be perfectly honest with you, I hope I'm not coming across arrogantly. I really believed that there was something that I could do and do well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave me the opportunity, and I worked with Vince Jr., I think 1978, I believe it was. If I'm wrong on dates here, but I think it was from 78 to maybe 81,
Mm-hmm.
where I did the commentating with him. And at that time, I don't know what else he did, if anything.
Yeah.
I think for a while then, he started Titan Sports up in New England.
Okay.
But it was, and again, I'm not sure if I'm correct here 100%. I think he was involved in some building that they had.
I think so too. Yeah.
But I think that it wasn't just wrestling. I think
Something with hockey, maybe, I think.
Yeah, I think he was involved in some kind of amateur hockey team he had been part of or something. But in other words, there were other, they may have even had some concerts or things like that.
I think they did too.
Yeah. But you know, I never knew too much about his business, but he did. I think he did form Titan Sports, and that was for that part. And then I think he started promoting some smaller shows in the area.
Yeah.
And I think he just grew from there, and that's how I knew him. You know, before he became the new chief.
Yeah. So back then was the chief. Vince Jr., was he a humble guy, or was he really arrogant because my dad's the boss and he runs the show?
Well, first of all, I never hung out with him.
Okay. I mean, when you would do commentary and stuff together.
Well, I never quite saw it that way.
Okay.
I thought that there were some things that I would have questioned about him.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it that he came across that I ever saw like, hey, my dad's the big cheese here, so I'm the second big cheese. And I didn't see that. No.
Yeah.
Not with me anyway.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else would tell you a different story.
I've never heard anything different.
I can only speak for myself, and that's the way it was.
Yeah. Now, in his book, Superstar Billy Graham claims that the night before he lost the belt to Bob Backlund, that you two had wrestled in a steel cage in Philadelphia. And he claims that you told him that business was so hot and so good that he should fake a knee injury so he wouldn't have to wrestle the match with Bob Backlund. He said that you had suggested this because that's what Buddy tried to do with you by suggesting the heart attack kind of thing, because business was so hot at the time with Billy on top as champ. Is there any truth to that?
If it is, then I'm suffering from amnesia because I really don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
And when he says business was so hot, the Garden was holding up well, but the rest of the territory was not holding up quite as well. And let me tell you something else why I think Vince McMahon Sr. I've heard people say to me, why Billy was only champion for 9 months. First of all, what a lot of people don't understand when you talk about Madison Square Garden does not make the territory. That's one club, most famous arena in the world, but it's one club.
Yeah.
If you do good in the Garden, but if Boston and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Springfield, Providence, and New Haven, Hartford, if these places go down, the Garden ain't going to keep you going.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think a lot of people don't understand that. So when you say it was so hot with Billy, Vince McMahon never forgot the Buddy Rogers thing.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy Rogers, who was had a history, for the business, but he also had a history for what they call shotgunning a territory.
Okay.
Shooting all kinds of crazy stuff in there.
Sure.
Well, the territory died with Buddy Rogers. Now, a lot of people may not recognize that. You know why? Because they looked at a particular club and they went by that particular club as the health of the whole territory. No, that doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
For example, some of these news guys wrote that my success in the Garden was exaggerated. There were times when I had not so good a period. But here's what they don't understand. Here's what they don't know, and they should do more research. Example, when I first came in after the Rock era, okay, and I came in after the Buddy Rogers, after I took the title from Buddy Rogers,
right,
we were doing great. We were doing great business all over. But guess what happens? We lost our TV. We lost Channel 5, which was a big station in New York City. That was our TV.
Wow.
Established. Well, when we lost that, till we lost that, we were going great guns. God, everything was going great. But now we lose the TV. But here's what happens. The rest of the territory was still doing wonderful, but the Garden, no TV.
Yeah.
And it's pretty difficult to maintain a club like that when you can't develop your talent on television for people to know who they are if they're going to be contenders against my title. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So what happens is the Garden starts dropping. And we're going. Vince McMahon felt, and I understood that, he felt that he had a contract with Madison Square Garden. I don't know the length of the contract. He may have had a year left, 2 years left. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But he was scheduled, he had the dates to go monthly. And Vince wanted to keep with the contract and do what he felt he was obligated to do. But I was concerned because I am the headliner. And I knew enough about the business by now that without television, without, giving exposure to would-be talent challengers, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So what happened? The Garden, first show without the TV, it comes down to here. Next one comes down to here. And I said to Vince, you want to keep these dates, but because you're worried about the Garden, I said, but if we keep going down, the Garden's going to tell you to leave.
Yeah.
They'll break the lease because I'm sure they had escape clauses. I says, it's best to meet with them. Maybe they can help you in getting a TV. Maybe they have some influence. After all, it's Madison Square Garden. Who knows?
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm not sure, I should say, if the Garden actually helped. I think they did, but I'm not 100% exactly what went on. But they helped to get on a Channel 47, a UHF station, Spanish station, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We got on there. But keep in mind, this is a Mickey Mouse station in comparison. It took time to develop the viewing audience. Mm. So during this time, again, the territory's doing great, but the Garden's not doing quite as great.
Yeah.
I've read things and think about my lean, where I wasn't drawn in the Garden. I'd like to have seen any of the people who followed me under those same conditions and see how they would have done. Yeah. So we were doing great again. After we established an audience, came 1968 or 69, I rest Crusher of Verdun. We had our first sellout with the Snoo TV 47, and now we had enough of an audience to where we're doing great business again. Guess what happens again? Eddie Einhorn, the owner of the Chicago White Sox, comes opposition to us, and guess what? He gets on Channel 9, big station, Channel 9. We're on Mickey Mouse Channel 47, and he came in with some great talent, a lot of great people in there, including Luthez.
Mil Mascaris, I think.
Mil Mascaris.
Yeah. Ivan Koloff, I think.
Led, Ivan Koloff, the Mongol, many guys, great talent. Yeah. So Vince was very concerned at this time because, my God, they got the great TV, Channel 9. They got all this great talent. Oh, my God, he was the top. I said, well, Vince, we're established now with 47. We do have an audience. We'll just have to fight them off and just keep going. Well, eventually we won. We won the battle, drove them out. And Vince then wound up working out a deal with Channel 9 where we got on Channel 9. But so then after Channel 9, we were great guns again. But you see, there was these periods, And they kind of lay it on me as if Bruno wasn't the draw anymore. You know, when, all due respect, when Morales, when Graham, when Backlund, everything was smooth sailing.
Yeah.
The TV was great. Everything was great. And Vince gave him quite a bit of help to make sure that the Garden, the reason why the Garden had to do well, and Vince wanted the Garden to do very well, was because that was the arena that went around the world, so to speak. People judged the territory by the Garden. If the Garden's doing good, that means that they're doing great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But that wasn't the deal at all, because a lot of times when the Garden did good, the other places did not do good. And so that's why a lot of people now say, well, I was Grand Champion only 9 months. Well, because Vince McMahon knew that he wasn't going to keep him longer than he felt he had to, because he also already saw the effects that was taking place in a lot of the other clubs.
Yeah.
And same thing with the other guys as well.
Yeah.
The other guys as well.
This doesn't concern you, but I'm just curious for your opinion on this. Luthez, in his book, he said when he was NWA champion, he didn't like to defend the title on shows where they had women's wrestling matches because he thought it cheapened the title. Yeah, and that's true, because when we interviewed Moolah and Mae Young, they said that he wouldn't work shows with them. What are your, do you feel the same way, or?
No.
I
never thought, I didn't know that about Thez. That's the first I hear of it. I did not know that. And, for me, I'm not going to lie, I was not the biggest fan of lady wrestlers, but I never protested or said a word about them being on the same card. No, I never did that. I'm not criticizing Lou, because I'm sure, this is the first I hear of it. I would have loved to have, he says because he cheapened the title. Huh?
Yeah, he says that in his book.
Hey, that was his opinion. You know, that was his opinion, and I can't say he's right or wrong. I didn't think that way. I just didn't think that way. So I don't know. I don't know who's right.
Did you have any say during your title reigns as to who you were going to wrestle, as far as who you'd have who you'd be stuck in match series with, or did Vince Sr. just make the matches? And
no. First of all, a lot of the talent that came here because of my recommendation.
Okay.
For example, I was in Australia, and I saw Tamaka. I didn't even know who he was. I never even heard of him. When I got some information from the promoter that he worked for AWA and then Roy Shires in San Francisco. I came back and I told Vince McMahon. I said, Vince, you got to make some contacts and get that guy over here. I said, I think I could really have some great matches and do some great business with this guy. He's a tremendous looking athlete. He's a Japanese guy who looks tremendous. He's close to 300 pounds, really put together, and I think I can have a great match with him. I was in Japan and I saw Bobby Duncombe. Never heard of Bobby Duncombe, but I watched him wrestle in one match in Japan. I came back, I told Vince McMahon, I said, Vince, you got to get a hold of this guy. Great talent. A lot of guys that I saw, that I told them, and then there were guys that I felt that would be tremendous to wrestle a number of times. But then I saw guys that I didn't think could fit that role. I didn't think that the talent was there.
Yeah.
And so they maybe a one-match deal. That was about it.
Yeah. Is it true that you recommended to Lou Albano that he should become a manager?
I didn't recommend it to him. I'll tell you the truth about that. Frankly, I didn't think Lou was the greatest wrestler around by any means.
Right.
But I noticed one time he was doing an interview, and he was talking on those interviews. And I said, boy, this guy's got the gift of gab. And I thought, I bet you'd make a heck of a manager. I told Vince McMahon Sr., I said, you know what? I says, this guy's a very mediocre wrestler. I said, but boy, he's got the gift of gab. I said, I think he'd be a tremendous manager. I says, I think you should try him out. I says, and make a manager out of him. I think he could really probably be a heck of a manager.
Yeah.
And I guess they got together and they said, well, let's try it. Vince says, let's try him out.
Yeah. And the rest
is history. Him out, and the rest is history, because he was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable. Absolutely. Larry Zbyszko claims that after your feud, that years later the two of you still don't get along, and he thinks a lot of that has to do with the fact that you feel he went behind your back and went to the office and kind of politic to get you out of retirement for the matches where you really didn't want to come out of retirement and wrestle him. Is that true?
I wasn't retired.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't retired. I was wrestling at the time.
Okay.
I wasn't a champion or anything.
Right.
But in fact, what I did was, after the second reign as champion, I went back to where I loved between the first reigns.
Okay.
Where I would go back and take shots here, take shot there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without that obligation of any kind. I would just accept what matches I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing all over again. But then it did come time. I was a realist, and I knew I was getting up there in age. I felt that there was time that I wasn't going to stick around that much longer, and I was going to get out. My main thing was, I don't know if take it the way you will, I wanted to get out on top.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out while people still would come and see me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get out when I was a guy who the fans had enough of.
Right.
They've seen enough of you, and what are you still doing here? Why don't you go?
Yeah.
I wanted to get out before it got like that. I wanted to get out while I was still on top.
Mm-hmm.
When the Zbyszko thing happened, nobody, I think Larry believed that he wasn't given the opportunity to be what he could have been, which was a headliner, because he was looked upon as Bruno's protege.
Mm.
And he felt that as long as he was Bruno's protege, he would never be looked upon seriously as the guy who could, be the next guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's how it started out, that he thought about having that workout,
Yeah.
which turned out to be what it did. And as you know, what tremendous business that did.
Yes.
Shea Stadium. What a lot of people don't know today, after all these years, why it was so amazing about Zbyszko and I in Shea Stadium. We drew well over 40,000 people, okay? But that same night, the Yankees were playing Baltimore at Yankee Stadium, because they were playoff.
Wow.
The playoffs had started, but they were for the playoffs coming up, And the Steelers were playing the Giants. This is September.
Yeah.
August the 9th. This was August the 9th.
Okay.
And the Steelers were playing the New York Giants at the Giants Stadium on an exhibition game.
Wow.
So that night, that's a heck of a night to
Yeah.
have that kind of thing going on and still draw 43, 44, 45,000 people, whatever it was. That's how hot that thing was. And the great thing about that, too, is because it was after that whole thing, I came into my retirement. So
Yes.
I wanted to get out on top. I think I did.
And you did. Now, you and I have talked about this before, and, but not obviously during this, documentary. Hulk Hogan wrote in his book that the sellout at Shea Stadium should be credited to him and Andre.
Well, then him and Andre wrestled in White Plains, New York after that. McMahon wanted to try them out. They drew like 1,200 people in an arena that holds about 50,000. So he could only draw 1,400 people there, but in Shea Stadium, he drew that gate. He wasn't in Pittsburgh, he wasn't in Boston, he wasn't any place else where we turned away thousands of people. We sold out Washington at 1:00 in the afternoon, and then that night we sold out Baltimore the same night. Hogan wasn't there. This guy is tremendous gull. I mean, for him to say something like that is guts. This is the same guy who says that he took wrestling out of the smoke-filled little back alley, whatever he called it, to mainstream. Before this idiot, and I'll call him an idiot, came into the scene, there was an Argentino Rocca who was wrestling in Madison Square Garden and all the other big arenas on a regular basis. And before Rocca, which is way before my time, guys like Jimmy Londas, the Schreiner Lois, and so many other great guys were wrestling at the major arenas. Mm-hmm. And I'm speaking for myself after the Rock era. I wrestled in all the major arenas before this guy was ever heard of. For him to say that he's the guy who brought it to the arena, I find it disgusting and arrogant, and in fact, I will blame him as being one of the big guys who took it from the main arenas and took it back down to the small arenas, because I like to ask Hogan and anybody else, how often do they go to Madison Square Garden these days?
I think like twice a year, if that.
Not even that. They can go for a whole year.
Yeah.
Now they go once a year. They come to my town of Pittsburgh twice a year. Philadelphia here. Every place else. seems to me like they are the ones who took it out of the main arena, and in fact, he takes credit for bringing it to the main. I think it's such arrogant. Why don't he talk about the wonderful things he did to this business by being one of the wonderful steroid chemical robots that came to this business, which is an unfortunate and tragic thing because there've been a lot of deaths, drug related.
Yeah, absolutely. You wrestled Pedro when Pedro was champion. Were there ever any talks to make matches with you and Backlund when Backlund was champion?
No. At that time, I think it was at the end. But I'm very proud of that match I had with Pedro Morales. We went about an hour, 17 minutes, strictly scientific, clean match, for the whole hour. Terrible conditions, rain, winds, it was terrible. But I'll tell you what, in my opinion, that was a classic match that Pedro and I had. It was a great match. Now, with Backlund, there was never any such talk.
Do you think that, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, do you think Backlund resented your popularity when you guys were wrestling together? He was champion and you were wrestling on other towns and other shows and doing better crowds and that kind of thing.
You know what? I really can't answer that because I never got that close with Backlund to know what was he thinking, what were his thoughts about this or that. To this day, I really don't know the guy well at all. I mean, I met him, of course.
Yes.
But as far as my opinion, what did he think about this or that? I really have no idea because I never heard anything. I never heard him express an opinion or anything like that. So I really honestly don't know.
Now, when you were doing color commentary and the business started to change, Hogan came in and they started using different guys and different kind of matches. How hard was it for you to sit there as a color commentator while you saw the business going into this new direction?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't know what was happening because I had retired. When I was called to come back as a color commentator and that, I gave it some thought. And then I thought, hey, why not? Because I was told to be once every 3 weeks. I thought, But I must say that even though for a while wrestling did have a big boom in the very beginning, but I never believed that it would be lasting. As far as the arena now, keep in mind, I'm an arena guy.
Yeah.
We didn't know pay-per-view events in my day. It didn't exist. We didn't know merchandising and how big that could be. That stuff didn't exist. I'm going strictly arena.
Sure.
I felt when I saw what was going on that it would be a matter of time that the arenas would not be successful anymore because I didn't believe in what they were doing, number one. I saw the changes that were coming about and I thought they were bad. And most disturbing to me, I saw the drug use, the steroids use and abuse, and that bothered me tremendously. And it wasn't only steroids, there were other issues. And that bothered me to the point where I thought, no, my time has been passed. I don't belong here. I don't want to be here. Yeah. And so it wasn't too long that I said, no, I don't want any part of this. I've got to get out.
Do you think that's what's hurt the business today, that era there, when they started focusing more on physiques and bodies as compared to how talented you could go in the ring?
No, I think they came in. I think McMahon came in with a completely different mentality. As he calls it sports entertainment. I don't think he was interested in the wrestling of that era. He wanted to bring on changes. And I think the one of the things he did, which financially might have been good, I don't know, but I think he went more on television as far as big productions, as far as this and that. And when you do that, and maybe made the big bucks from sponsors, I don't know anything about that, but I do know this: that once you do all that and you put top guy versus top guy at the on television shows, then you lose it for the number one. You lose it for the arena. Number two, if what he did on TV turned off a lot of people, like the fans of my era, let's say. Yeah. Then he lost those fans, and then he created new fans, but the new fans were not the loyal fans of my era. I remember when I wrestled, whether it be Madison Square Garden or Boston Garden or Pittsburgh, as far as my eyes would take me, I could see the same faces month in and month out. Yeah. Okay. You don't have that today. They give so much of it on television. Number one, they don't give real reason why anybody should go to the arena. What are they going to go to the arena and see different than what they're seeing on TV? So what should they go pay at an arena when they're seeing it for free on television? Yeah. I mean, on TV, they give you, I don't know the name of these guys because I never watch wrestling, but of the names that I remember, let's say like this Undertaker guy, well, he wrestles another top guy, whoever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the names. I can throw you a bunch of names, but they're on television wrestling each other.
Yeah.
So how are you going to put those matches at the arena?
Yeah.
You know, and draw that. And then not only that, but the way they start doing things, like, for example, years ago, they had Undertaker having caskets and supposedly burying somebody alive. They had some where they crucified somebody. You know, that's a big turnoff to a lot of people. And I think that all these things, a lot of people may watch it, although their ratings for cable, it's okay. But when you compare their ratings with network television, they're really Mickey Mouse. Yeah. But cable-wise, in comparison to other cable shows, I guess they're still that's what they do, a 2.5, 3 rating,
like a 3.7 sometimes, 3.5.
Okay. You know, so for cable, maybe it's okay, but you can compare it with, you know what I mean?
Right.
So the audience that they draw, they on TV, they'll maybe sell merchandise to them. Maybe they'll do this and that. But these same people, it's obvious that they could go to the arenas, the McMahon's promotions, because those people won't buy the tickets to go to the arena.
Yeah. You're back, and actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were actually booked to wrestle Hulk Hogan back in the day, correct?
Yeah, I think twice. Once I remember for sure at the Civic Center in Wheeling, West Virginia. And he didn't show up. No reason why. He just didn't show up, and Sergeant Slaughter took his place. He knew what kind of shape I was in, even at that age. Because anybody who knew me, they always knew that what kind of shape I was in that ring. And I really believe to this day, he knew that I would blow him up in about 10 minutes to where he wouldn't be able to catch his breath. And he didn't want no part of it.
Yeah. Wow. Now,
what was that?
Now, what led to you coming out of retirement in the mid-'80s? When you came out of retirement in the mid-'80s?
Well, that's an unfortunate situation that happened with me. I had a son who was wrestling at the time, David, and he wanted to come into he came to the WWF. Vince McMahon wanted him there. I didn't know what I was going to be set up for, and unfortunately, I got myself in a situation that made me very upset, even angry. But I felt at the time that there wasn't too much I could do about it, and that is that when my son came here, Vince McMahon, some of the clubs, by the way, Hogan was the champion, were already slipping, like Boston was already down. Philadelphia was down. Pittsburgh was down. McMahon asked me to put on the tights again. I said, well, you got to be kidding at my age, you know? I said, no. So I think somebody went to David and they told David, my son, they said, it's too bad your father won't put on the tights because that could be a great thing for you. You and your dad as a tag team. He said, that would be a great springboard for you to get up there. So my kid came to me, says, Jace, he says, they want to put us as a team and you won't do it. I said, David, I'm an old guy for this ring. I said, and besides, if they want to do something with you, I said, they could do with you like they're doing with everybody else. Put you on TV. You look good. Do your best. Be the best you can be. And that's how you become. You know, if you have, I said, I don't have to put, why not? So I never wanted to be said, because my son and I already had certain issues. I didn't want it to be said that because of me and not willing to do whatever, that he may have not gotten the opportunity. So I put tights back on. That's how that came about. There was no comeback. I even erased that from my life. But I came back to work supposedly a few matches. Would be me and David in Boston, tag team. We wrestled tag team, and even in the Garden. And other places, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. And then when we had completed that, I'd be back just strictly as a commentator. But what was happening with David is he'd be back as a preliminary. And he would get angry and upset and he would leave. Well, now that's what, in my opinion, that's what McMahon wanted. Because now he knew that in order for David to come back, I would have to meet his demands. And his demands was to have me in tights again. And on the side, he would ask me to wrestle here and there. And I couldn't say no, because I would talk to my son. I'd say, what are you doing? If you want to be a wrestler, then you got to stick with it. If not, get out. Oh, I'll be back. I promise. So I would meet McMahon's demands and put on the tights. And I hated it. I despised it. I was angry about the whole thing. And then again, I'm seeing stuff with these guys, what they were doing, habits they had. I said, man, I got to get out. So I told my kid, I said, you make up your mind whether you're going to be a wrestler or get out of the business. I said, but I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And I got out. And of course, when I got out, they played him a little bit dirty, even though David didn't use his own head. He got into a scramble with somebody in someplace in New York. And McMahon had a release put on the paper that because of his, I don't remember, behavior, something like that, he got into a fight.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't have never done. I don't condone that at all. That he had to be terminated. At the same time, he had Macho Man, who made the news all over for hitting a 13-year-old kid in Florida. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
He had other guys, which I don't even want to mention. I'll mention that jerk, but I want to mention other guys that had similar, bigger problems than anything David had. But David is a guy who got that. Of course, that was McMahon's way. And so, but then I got out. But I never considered that a comeback. It was a situation that I was put into, that I didn't want no part of it, but I felt that I had no choice at the time.
Yeah.
But I was very resentful of it, very, very resentful.
Was there a big styles clash? Because now you were wrestling a different generation of wrestlers. You had all of your opponents were from your generation. Now you're wrestling guys like Savage, Honky Tonk Man. What was there a big styles clash? Did you find
a big what?
Styles clash, a clash in just the way that they did things, the way that you wanted to do things.
Keep in mind, this is the period that I'm talking about, that I didn't want no part of this and that. So I went in the ring with the attitude of to get this thing over best I can, and I'm not going to lie about this. I felt that it was a different time. I didn't feel like it was anything like my time, what I experienced. So I'm doing what I felt that I needed and had to do, but I didn't care for any of it.
Yeah.
Whether it be the wrestlers that I wrestled with or anybody. I just didn't. My heart wasn't in anything of it. So this comparison that you're telling me to, I never thought of anything like that. I just knew how disgusted and how much I didn't want to do this or be this and all that. The only thing is, which was a slap on Hogan's face, that he should be ashamed of himself, that he talks. I went in there with Savage and we sold out Boston.
That's right. You did wrestle Savage in Boston.
Yeah, we sold it out.
Wow.
And Hogan had been there and he was down to, I don't know, nothing. I mean, he wasn't drunk anymore. And he had just gotten a belt.
Yeah.
And here he already, McMahon needs help in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, and Hogan's the champion. What a joke. So, but anyway, no, I never felt good about wrestling any of those guys. If the truth, I know the truth, never felt very, very good about it.
Yeah. Was there anyone, because you wrestled everybody at that time. You wrestled Savage, Piper, Orndorff, Adonis, everybody. Was there anybody in particular that you liked wrestling, or you were just so disgusted to even be put back in there that you didn't really? I
didn't like to wrestle any of them, but I will say this, that Orndorff, I have to say this about Orndorff. He was a hard worker in that ring. This guy went in there and he gave it his all. I mean, he was nobody could accuse this guy of it. I'm not suggesting that necessarily the other guys weren't.
Right.
Because a lot of them were. In all honesty, for their style, for whatever they did, they were hard. But Orndorff was a hard, solid guy. But I wrestled him. I wrestled Macho Man. I wrestled
Piper. You wrestled Piper. Honky Tonk Man.
Yeah, Honky Tonk Man. I wrestled all those guys.
Yeah. What led to you finally just saying, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore?
I was very concerned when I was WWF because I felt that the drug situation was serious. And I was always worried about that. And in fact, I had to go on a little tour where I had to go to Texas. I had to go to Arizona. I had 2 shots in Arizona, Tucson and Phoenix. I had to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas, I think Jackson, Mississippi, if I'm not sure. And when McMahon told me about these, I told him right out. I said, no, I said, I will not. Because what happens when you get to the airport, they used to rent cars and then you drove to these arenas. I said, no, I don't want to be riding with anybody. I said, because if a car gets stopped and they find drugs or something in the car and I'm in that car, I'm going to be put in the same as everybody else. I says, and I will not do that. So he says, so I'll tell you what I'll do then. I'll send Jay Strongbow, who was straight, he wasn't one of that clan. He says, as the agent, and he'll rent a car, and then just the two of you will drive. And under those conditions, I agreed. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that I knew I had to get away because, first of all, I knew some nasty had to happen. And Rick McGraw, wasn't it Rick McGraw?
Rick McGraw, right.
He died. He was a very, 27, 28
Real
years
young.
old, died because of the drugs. And then Gino Hernandez followed. And then a bunch of other people followed. I said, no, I'm out of here. And I got out.
Wow. How did Vince take it when you quit? Was Vince upset or did he understand?
Well, first of all, I tried to call him 3 or 4 times to let him know what I was doing. And he would talk to me. I talked to Pat Patterson. I said, yeah, I want to talk to Vince. He said, what is it? What do you want to tell him? I said, I want to tell him that I'm leaving. Why? I said, well, I'd rather talk to him about it. This one. Then, who else did I talk to? I talked to everybody but him. So then I left.
Yeah. Did they try and get you to come back, either as a commentator or anything like that?
No, they did not try to get me to come back.
Wow. Now, Mick Foley, in an interview, he said that he thinks that Vince has a special place in his heart for you and would like to have you back and to honor you. How do you respond to that?
Gee, I like Mick Foley, but maybe took one bump too many in his head. Because Vince McMahon has no soft heart for anybody.
Yeah.
I don't believe that for one split second. The reason why McMahon wants me in his Hall of Fame, I'll tell you why. When he first started that Hall of Fame, my name wasn't even considered. Not that I would have accepted even that, but my name wasn't even considered because Vince wanted to show me that I didn't exist. I didn't exist in this world anymore. So I wasn't even considered. But what happened, it backfired on him. Because when he inducted a few people, he got mobbed with fan mail. I think you know about that. And he said, how could you call it Hall of Fame? Here's a guy who was world champion 12 years, sold out more than, and he said, and he's not in there. And he never expected that would happen to him. The next year, the same thing. And then if you remember, he didn't have the Hall of Fame anymore for a few years. And then he decided to come back again. And he thought by this time, maybe that nonsense would be over with. But it wasn't over with. Every time he had the Hall of Fame, he said, well, how could you call Hall of Fame if Bruno Sammartino's not in there? So then he got his attorney to call my attorney to talk about a meeting and I met with Jim Ross and his attorney, McMahon's attorney, a guy named Jerry McDivitt. And I met with them and my attorney, about my friend. He's more than my attorney. He's my good friend. His name is Marty Lazaro. Okay. We met with them and, Jim Ross was very nice. And he said that if anything, what he wanted to accomplish, he wanted to see if he could open the door a little bit toward this goal. I didn't even want to have that meeting, but Marty begged me. And like I said, he's my friend first and lawyer second. I did it more for him than anything else. I was very polite with Ross. I liked Ross. I never had any issues with Jim Ross. But not too much actually came out of that. We kind of went our separate ways. He said Jim Ross was going to talk to McMahon, see how he felt about now that he talked to me. Yeah. So what happened then, I think that the lawyer contacted me. I don't remember. I was subpoenaed about when Zbyszko was suing, I believe, the WWE over the living legend thing. Right. Something. It was crazy lawsuit, really. But anyway, I was subpoenaed on that, and by McMahon's lawyers. So I had to go there. And after it was over, he had asked me if I'd go up to his office. He wanted to talk to me privately. When I went over to his office to talk to me privately, he tried to talk to me to go into the Hall of Fame. I told him I wanted to get out of there. I really didn't. I didn't want to get into going on. I said to him, let me think about it. There was nothing for me to think about. I wasn't interested. Yeah. So I left. Then they called again We had just come back from Europe where we were shooting. Marty Lazare wanted to shoot where we hid from the Nazis during World War II, so he wanted to shoot that area where we hid for those 14 months. So when we came back, McDivitt told the Marty, he says, "Get Bruno, come to the arena. Vince is going to be here. I'd like to talk to him." I told Marty, "No, I don't want to talk to the guy." He said, "Bruno, what do you got to lose?" He said, "We'll walk out. Please." He said, again, I didn't want no part of it, but for Marty, I said, okay. But it turned out to be okay. You know why? Because I had a chance to get a few things off my chest.
Did you?
I looked right at McMahon in the face, and they said they made a mistake. They said that McMahon always had respect for the old timers. And I looked at him and I said, "Vince," I said, "you have shown nothing but disrespect for the old timers." I said, "You bring guys like Mike Tyson and you give him $3.5 million to make a guest appearance as a referee. You brought in Pete Rose and you gave him six-figure things, and other athletes, showbiz people, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You bring a guy like Dominic DiNucci, might throw him $1,000, $1,500. You bring a guy like Killer Kowalski, $1,000, $1,500. You bring a guy like Albano, $1,000, $2,000. I says, and you want to sit here and say that you have nothing but the utmost respect for the old timers. I says, well, I'll tell you what. I said, if you ever want to do anything with me, you have to show me the same kind of respect you show the non-wrestlers that you have shown so much respect for. I said, because if you think you'll ever show the disrespect for me, like you've done these guys, I said, you might as well forget about it. Not that I intend to go back or anything,
right.
But I just wanted to let them know that if you even think about it, you better think on the terms of these other people that you brought in.
Yeah.
Because if you think you're going to treat me like you treated these guys, you can forget about it. And so with that, then now he knew that he couldn't deal with me, because he knew that if he tried to make me offers like he did with all these wrestlers that go to the Hall of Fame and they get a bone thrown at him for doing it, he knew now that wasn't going to be with me. So instead, they put out a little thing that we couldn't get together because Bruno's very hostile, a very bitter guy.
Yeah.
They said, and so that was the end of that. And they've tried one more time, I think, since then. But I made it very clear that I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. Something I skipped over accidentally, just back to that last run that you had. Some people don't know this, but your last active match was teaming with Hulk Hogan, correct? In the Meadowlands against...
No, not in the Meadowlands, in the Baltimore Civic Center.
Oh, okay. Against Akeem and Bundy, right?
Against Bundy and the one-man gang.
Oh, one-man gang.
They called them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was the last match.
What do you? How did you get along with Hogan, or did you just?
It wasn't a question of getting along. I just, like I said, I hated everything that went on during that time, and I just went in the ring and did my thing and left.
Yeah.
There was nothing communication wise. I don't think. No, it was nothing. It was just something I felt that I was trapped into because of the circumstances I told you about.
Yeah.
And so I went through with each one of these matches. But, but all the same.
How did you feel when you were edited out of the A&E Unreal History of...
Well, that's another thing. I'm glad you said that, because that's another thing I was able to get off my chest with McMahon. I said to Vince, I said, Vince, I said, you have respect for the old timers. I said, hey, take A&E. I said, they did a documentary, a 2-hour documentary, Vince. I said, my name was never mentioned once. I said, a funny thing happened, Vince. I says, A&E contacted me. A woman called me. They wanted to come to Pittsburgh and do a film me on a long interview like. I said to her, well, why do you want to do that when you produced, I knew, of course, but I was just being a little, I said, you produced a documentary on wrestling on A&E. And you saw fit not to even mention me once in this whole documentary. And now why do you want to come to Pittsburgh to do this interview? Well, she said, it wasn't, I forget the words, like it was beyond their control. I says, in other words, because somebody let you know in uncertain terms that my name could not be mentioned. I said, now, you can admit it or not. I said, but I know it. She says, well, then she says, if you know, you know. In other words, she admitted to it. And I said, well, let me tell you, if you and A&E we're going to take on a project like that to do a documentary on professional wrestling. And if you allow any one individual to distort away from a documentary of what it's supposed to be, I said, that speaks volumes about what you, A&E, are all about. So I said, so as far as you coming over here and doing an interview, I said, you know what you can do with it, lady? I said, you can stick it. And I hung up on her.
Wow.
And I told McMahon that.
Wow. Now, Ric Flair talked about you in his book. He said he worked underneath, and we talked about this in Madison Square Garden, wrestling Pete Sanchez, and that you had worked in St. Louis on shows with him. He said in watching you, he wasn't impressed. He said you didn't do much in the ring, and he said you weren't a draw outside of the Northeast.
Wow. I wasn't a draw outside. Well, then, let's show how much Ric Flair knows about my career. I went to San Francisco, and Ray Stevens and I sold out the Cow Palace. Okay, not once, but several times. I went to Florida with Tanaka, and we sold out in a big arena in St. Petersburg. I went to Tanaka in the Omni in Georgia, and we sold that out. I drew a big house with Kowalski in Los Angeles. How can I think of everything? In Japan, when I was in Japan, Flair, guess what? He worked underneath me. I was the headliner with Baba. He was on the card underneath. The only one time I was in Japan with him. He needs to be reminded that he has the audacity to say that, because when he came to New York and he told you worked under me, they always thought about Hogan. They're going to bring him in and poke him up with Hogan. Well, him and Hogan wrestled all over the Northeast, and they couldn't sell out anything. You know about that. Mm-hmm. Madison Square Garden, they drew 9,000 or 10,000 people.
It's true.
All over the territory. J.J. Dillon was telling me how they were shocked, McMahon and company, and how they had to redo the scheduling because they knew that the match that they had such high hopes for didn't deliver anywhere near that. And as far as me being lazy, talk to guys like the Kowalskis of the world and others, and tell them what Flair said and see what they think of that. As far as I didn't show, I'll tell you something about Flair. That some people write him as the greatest wrestler that ever lived. I have to laugh at that. That is such a cartoon. I will give you this. He is a hard worker. I would never take it away from Flair. He was a hard worker. And he took a lot of bumps in that ring. But you saw Ric Flair wrestle once, you've seen him 100 times, because Ric Flair was the same match every time he went into the ring. Same match. Bruno Sammartino may have not been the most talented guy in the world, but I'll tell you what he was. If he wrestled the Bruiser Brody or Kowalski, he could be a brawler. If he wrestled Hans Mortier, he was a wrestler. If he wrestled Ray Stevens, high spots galore. Same with other guys like Cicluna, with Koloff and many others. I went into that ring and not be repetitious, because I seen guys with, I won't mention a bunch of names, that were repetition. I thought there's something wrong with this picture. How can you come back month after month or whatever and be so much the same? So I was a wrestler one time, I was a great high spot guy another time, I was a brawler another time, and I was a strong man another time. It depends. And by doing that, I really believe that's why I had such a long career and a successful career. When I quit this business, we were selling out all over. How long has Ric Flair been selling out all over? When's the last time he ever sold out all over?
It's been a while.
So I mean, for him to say just in the Northeast, well, where was he big at then? He certainly wasn't big in the Northeast. I know he wasn't in the Carolinas.
Right.
I won't take it away from him. But for him to say, like me, Northeast, but him and everybody else everywhere. When I went from New York to San Francisco or to Los Angeles or to Tucson or to Phoenix or to Atlanta or to Florida, I went as the headliner. When Ric Flair came to New York from the Carolinas, he came to wrestle Pete Sanchez in the preliminary. I mean, what does that tell you? I went from New York as a headliner in all these other territories. They came to New York as preliminaries because they weren't big enough to be the headliner in New York or any of the surrounding towns in New York. So, Ric Flair has got a lot of guts saying what he says, a lot of guts, because if there's a guy, and I give you that, the hard worker, no question about it, the bump man, no question about it. But you want to talk about who's a one-way, repetition-wise, he's it. You've seen him once, you've seen him 100 times. That's Ric Flair.
He also claims that at that Raw show that you were at, remember you were in Pittsburgh at the arena, you were there shooting something else and they were coming in.
Yep.
He claims that he went to shake your hand and you turned your back on him and walked away.
That I will call him on this for everybody here. He's the biggest liar in the world. Because there were people around. I was speaking to a lady who works for McMahon. This is when I had my meeting with McMahon today. I was speaking to a lady. I don't remember her name, but she's involved with McMahon's organization. I don't know what her role is, but they said hello to me and somebody from the arena. I was speaking to them, and along with me was Marty Lazara, my attorney. In fact, his father, who's since passed away, unfortunately, was there, and a few other people. When I was talking to these people, I happened to look and I saw Ric Flair about 20, 25 feet from me. I turned around, started walking toward him, and he turned around like a little boy and he took off. And even a few people there said, gee, what's with him? Because they saw I was walking toward him. Yeah. He took off. So when I heard that he said that, I couldn't believe it. I thought, my God, how can you say that? There were people around. They saw what happened. Yeah. No, liar. He's a liar for saying that. He's the one who took off when I started walking toward him.
Does it bother you when some people put him on a pedestal as a good ambassador to the wrestling business?
No, he's anything but a good ambassador to the business. I'll tell you why I say that. He's anything but. This is a guy who exposed himself on an airplane and had a lawsuit as a result of it. Whether they settled the lawsuits or not, I don't care. The fact is that he did that, okay? Number two, he was known, and I never saw this, but I've had plenty of guys who told me that he did this on a regular basis. Go and jump on a bar and moon everybody in the place. That's a great ambassador to the business. This is a guy who was almost arrested for not paying income tax. Okay? And Crockett had to work out deals, whatever he did then. And I understand he got into a similar jackpot again. Okay? This is a guy who, I don't know if this is correct because I didn't hear it firsthand, but this is a guy who understand even wrote or bragged about other affairs, even though he was married. So this is what you want to call a great ambassador to the game? I don't know. Times have changed. I wouldn't see it that way.
Are you surprised that superstar Billy Graham wound up coming back into the WWE and doing things with them?
I'm never surprised at too much of anything in this business, to be perfectly honest with you. No, that didn't surprise me at all. Not at all about Billy.
Yeah. You're very outspoken about steroids in general, not just in wrestling, but in general.
Yes.
Do you think that Congress should investigate pro wrestling with the steroid investigations along with football, baseball?
They should have investigated wrestling way before baseball, football, anyhow, because wrestling got the most deaths from that drug related than any other sport. You know, how often did you hear of baseball, football, hockey, of deaths? They may have been one or two, I don't know. But how many would you say there have been in wrestling? Phil Mushnick, I think, or somebody wrote, he said that in the past 20 years, there's been like 70, 80 deaths. Yeah. If that doesn't bring the attention to somebody, I'd say there's something wrong with this picture.
Yeah. Are you surprised that, you know, I mentioned quotes from Flair, Hogan, Dusty. Are you surprised that these guys keep popping up out of the woodwork and taking shots at you in their books?
I have to wonder what their problem is. I don't know. Hogan claims that, you did say
we talked about this.
Yeah, that he did this, he did that. You know what? I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist to try to analyze what it is with these guys, what kind of a problem they have. Yeah. But so something's wrong there. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
Why do you think back in, I don't know if it was 2000 or 2001, why do you think that Vince Russo was spreading rumors around that you were negotiating with WCW when you said you weren't?
I never did. I don't know. In fact, I think Meltzer wrote that some about me that I was negotiating seriously with McMahon about getting in. I don't know where they get these, just because there may have been a meeting, but I told you the circumstance for those meetings. Yeah. There were never meetings where I actually went into these meetings believing that there was going to be some kind of a deal worked out. Absolutely. I never went in there with that kind of mentality because I really didn't want to have anything I don't want anything to do with the Hall of Fame. I don't want to have anything to do with that organization. In fact, somebody, and I'm not going to mention names, but I'm going to tell you what somebody said. Somebody said to me, McMahon's a good businessman. He says, and I'll bet you that I could propose a business deal with you and McMahon, and I bet you he would buy into it. And I said to him, no, he wouldn't. I says, because if you make a legitimate business proposition to where he has to treat me not like some of these old timers that he's done with. I said he would never go for it. He says, I'm going to try it. I said, do what you want. You'll see. And he did. This is Israel did.
Yeah.
And he was completely turned down.
Wow.
For what deal he offered.
Yeah.
Completely turned flat.
Wow.
So.
What do you think of Vince wrestling?
What do you mean?
Vince Jr. wrestling, being a wrestler?
Well, being a wrestler, it boggles my mind. Not the fact he's just a wrestler, but the fact that at his age that he would fool around with steroids.
Yeah.
Now, I know that he's fooling around with steroids because his own lawyer told me that McMahons, the shipments of steroids that were coming, when they tried to indict him in New York, remember, on distribution?
Right.
They came out on that case that he was not distributing, but they were for his own personal use. So there's been a clear admission of him using steroids. That's what blows my mind, that this guy, after the age of 50, that he would get on chemicals like that, which anybody knows, and he's not stupid, anybody knows that these things, chemicals, can be extremely dangerous to you. And yet at that stage of his life, I think, what is he now, 60, 61, 62?
He's up there, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he's still doing it now, but you have to be a little insane, I think, to get involved with something that I think it's fairly fair to say that it's been proven that there are dangerous chemicals. Yeah. So I don't understand that. Here's a guy who's had great success, made a ton of money. Why? I wonder, there must be something missing for someone like that he wants to be in the ring at this stage of his life, and he would really use these kind of chemicals that could do serious damage to him. You know, I've always said this in life. You live a respectable life, and look what happens to a lot of people. And I'm sure everybody knows somebody with good life, and what happens? They come down with this. I know a friend, a respectable person, who always lived a good life, has been diagnosed with MS. I know people who have been diagnosed with diabetes. I know people, all kinds of things, and they've lived a normal life. My point is that as we age, you never know what's going to happen to any of us. But when you start fooling around with things like that, it's almost like ensuring yourself of horrible things to come.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why maybe I'm a coward. I wouldn't even take an aspirin when I was wrestling, no matter how much I was hurt, because I always feared that these things could have side effects that in turn could do greater problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against medicine. Thank God for doctors who come up with medicine, because what would diabetics do without their medications? What would people with other diseases do without? But that's a different situation. Yeah. These are medicines that, unfortunately, as we go through life, things happen to us as we age. And so you need help from the medical field. But these kind of drugs that we're talking about, these are killer drugs. That's like begging for something to happen to you down the road.
Yeah.
And that I don't understand.
Can you talk about the love affair that your fans still have with you? I mean, whenever I have you on my radio show, the fans just love you. Can you talk about the love affair that you have with your fans?
Well, when I was wrestling, I could feel it because the arenas, the people that we got and how they reacted. I mean, my God, I'd walk out of the dugout to go into the ring and people start chanting, Bruno, Bruno, all 20-some thousand people in the Garden of Boston. So that used to touch me all the time. I mean, you never get used to that. It always touched me. But what amazed me and shocked me is that when I was finally through and I left, I thought, I think I'm a pretty realistic person. I felt that, you go on now with the rest of your life, and so will everybody else. People take over your place, and then, people are going to cheer and whatever. People come up. And I expected, honestly, to be a guy that of yesteryear, and that's the end of the story.
Right.
So it has surprised me tremendously when I've gone to New York or Boston to make some appearances and stuff like that, how people remember. That has surprised the heck out of me. And naturally, it's a good feeling. I'm not going to lie about that.
Yeah. Do you get surprised when young fans, teenagers, come up to you and show you the same kind of affection as the older fan base?
Well, I was telling one of the now big stars here, my good friend here, Mark Randy. I was telling him that I'm shocked. I was very surprised at that, but I was telling him, we were talking, I was telling him that when I was signing autographs, that people would come over and they'd say to me, gee, I heard so much about you from my grandfather or from my father, from my uncle. And he said, and when I heard that you were going to appear here, and I saw tapes, I wanted to have the opportunity to meet you in person. Of course, it's very flattering. So a lot of these younger people, I guess they know you because there are tapes out there that they've seen you in, or because maybe their moms or dads or grandparents were big fans. Mm-hmm. And I guess it passes on. I used, I told Tom I used this, that Mickey Mantle, Willie Mason, these guys, there's a young people today that couldn't have been around when they played, but they heard so much from their parents or whatever, about Mickey Mantle. And so then, and I like to think of our business, wrestling, that people that were big fans might tell their younger people about this guy or that guy or that guy. Yeah. And so I think that, that maybe your name carries on that way. I don't know what other explanation there is. I mean, I know when I was in Detroit, I got tremendous reaction, and I was surprised by it. New York, I wasn't quite as surprised when I appeared there, because New York, I've been there so long. But Detroit, I was a little surprised, but it was a pleasant surprise. Yeah.
In 1989, actually, we were talking about Flair a little bit. In 1989, you actually came into WCW for one night and refereed the Halloween Havoc with Flair and Muta and Sting and Terry Funk.
Yes.
How did that all come about? Because it seemed like you weren't doing much in the way of with WWF at the time and WCW, and then you came for the one shot and that was it.
They had a fella named Gary
Juster.
Gary Juster.
Okay.
Gary Juster contacted me, and he told me that the fella that was in charge of the WCW at the time heard somebody.
Yeah, Jim Herd.
Jim Herd, yeah. That asked Gary Juster, I understand you know Bruno, blah, blah, blah. And he said, boy, I would sure like to have him as a guest referee of this match with all these guys that are from his era, more or less, I think that's how it came about.
Yeah.
And I'll be real honest with you. I said, no, I wasn't interested in that. But then this Jim Herd called me, and it's the old saying, he gave me an offer. So I did it. Yeah, but I had no problem with that. I mean, it's just that, not that I had anything against anybody that was wrestling or anything like that.
Yeah.
I referee. I just never saw myself comfortable. I don't think I'm any good at it. Frankly, I'm not a good referee. I've done it a few times, and I always felt very uncomfortable because I see these good referees. These guys are great. They really are, they're good.
Yeah.
I'm not. And so I just didn't feel very comfortable with it. That was the only reason why I hesitated.
Did Jim Herd or anybody try and make you an offer to stick around in some kind of a full-time role, or?
No, they asked me, they would invite me at different times to come in to make an appearance for them. Mm-hmm. But as far as coming in on a regular basis, I cannot remember ever getting an offer like that. I don't think so.
What's your daily workout like? Because you're obviously still in tremendous shape.
Well, I've taken my body weight down. I had to because of all these surgeries. My doctors advised me to less weight, be less stress on the lower back and hip and the knees and that. So, from my heaviest, but I was 275. But when I broke my neck and I went down to 250, I never gained that weight. I purposely stayed down because I was getting old. I was in my mid-30s and that. Now I'm down to about 215, 218. I fluctuate around there. And basically my workout is that 3 days a week I work out with the weights. And 3 days a week I do road work. It's the road work that really keep my weight intact. The weights don't do that.
Yeah.
But the road work enables me to keep this weight, which for me at this stage of my life, at my age, with these problems that I've had, this is a good weight for me. Actually, I try to get even lower, but I can't. I just can't get below this.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this before. Have you ever thought about writing a book for older people to keep in shape? Because I couldn't think of a better representation than yourself to go around and preach physical fitness.
I've never been approached for any such thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one negative thing about in wrestling, unfortunately. If you're another athlete like a baseball, football, or whatever, and you were known for something like that, I think there'd be a lot of interest. But somehow for wrestling, because whatever all the reasons are, I don't think that we get the same equal opportunities like a lot of other sport figures will get.
Gotcha. In closing the interview, we always ask our guests to talk to their fans. If there's anything you want to say to your fans out there, I know your fans are ungodly loyal to you. If there's anything you want to say to your fans as we close out the interview.
Well, to all the fans that were there in my time when I was still wrestling, I think I've expressed this many, many times to different places I've been, different radio shows that I've done. I've always have felt and feel to this day that a deep gratitude, because I've never kidded myself or fooled myself in believing that I was so great and I was a star. You're only good when the fans are there to support you, and the fans supported me. I've always been extremely grateful, and all I can say is I did the best that I could in turn. In the ring, to give them what they hoped to get out of me. I know I gave it the best that I had to give, and well, I've never forgot their support. Always appreciated, and to the young fans who have been nice to me, I appreciate the kind thoughts that the kind of things that they've expressed to me from what they've heard from their families, whoever. You're always deeply grateful for that, because I never expected anything after I retired from wrestling. So to have fans remember you like that, it's very touching. I appreciate it very, very much. And like I said, I'll always be very, very grateful, because I know that if it weren't for the fans, I would have been a construction worker. That's it.
Actually, before we started taping the interview, you mentioned that you had a match, and there was a guy that died on you in the middle of the match.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was a very tragic. It was Chick Garibaldi, and I'm a young guy in the business, and we were wrestling in Sunnyside Gardens. And I don't know how long we had wrestled, maybe 10 minutes. I'm not sure. It's such a long time ago. And I remember I caught him with what we call a body slam. And as soon as I slammed him, before I went to cover him, there was a gargling sound. And I don't know what it was, what I sensed, but all I knew is that it stopped me. Stopped me. And then I looked, and I saw his eyes were kind of rolled back, and I just knew something was wrong. I was 23 years old, but I knew something was wrong, and we had a state athletic commission doctor that would always sit at ringside, and I waved him, like first he kind of fluffed me off, like, I said, get up here. Mm-hmm. So he finally came, and he realized that something was seriously wrong. I remember they took out of the black little bag he had, he took out a needle. My God, it seemed like it was that long. He put together, and he put him right through right through to his chest. And then they carried him down to the dressing room area, and they were trying to massage his chest. And I was strong, so I said, let me, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was a young guy, and this just like I couldn't believe this was happening. So I remember I was digging in his chest, and the guy says, not too hard. So he stopped, but I just, and then the guy said, forget it. He says, it's over. He said, he's gone.
Wow.
And it just for months. But then an autopsy showed that what had happened was he evidently had some clogged arteries, and the pressure, I guess, or whatever, it burst or something. Something burst that immediately, was just like it killed him immediately. But anyway, it was as a result of that, not because of anything like I did in a ring, like that body slam or anything like that.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it didn't make me feel any better. I still felt for about, I don't know how many months, I couldn't get that out of my head to have experienced that. It was really, really bothersome to me.
Wow.
That was Chick Garibaldi. He came from a very famous wrestling family. He had a brother named Gino Garibaldi, who was a big deal, especially in St. Louis and all through, but everywhere. And then the son, Leo Garibaldi, if you remember.
I remember that name, yeah.
That was Gino's son, Leo.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know the other Garibaldis, but I think there were 4 or 5 brothers. And Chick was the one, unfortunately, that this happened with. And the biggest, what was really a tragedy, he just came in from Australia, him and Pat O'Connor. And he was going to St. Louis, where he had his family. He had a wife and kids. And this happened to him after he came back from Australia and before he got back to St. Louis. So he never saw his wife and kids.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really something.
Wow. Now, you talked earlier in the interview when you were champ that your deal with Vince was that you got a percentage of the houses, and
Right.
that's how you were paid. Did there ever come a point in time where you thought you were being cheated out of what was...
In a wrestling game with the honest promoters? Of course, he and I, how do I put it? We had a strange relationship. There were times when we got along great, and there were times when we fought. Hard. Yeah. For example, I told you about when I came back with my broken neck because of the Ali and Aki thing didn't go well.
Yeah.
I was promised that besides getting a percentage of the gate in Shea Stadium where I wrestled with Stan Hansen, that I was to get a small percentage, very small percentage of all the arenas where it was going to be a closed circuit. So when I got paid and I got my 9%, that was fair, legit. But when I questioned about how about the I forget if it was 2% or a small percentage of the other arenas. He said, I was told that Bob Arum, the fight guy who was involved in the thing, that he wouldn't go for it. I said, well, wait a minute. I didn't make no deals with Bob Arum. This was the deal we made. And he said, well, I couldn't do anything about it. So that created something because I came out with a broken neck trying to help bail out because things were looking at bleak at that particular time. So naturally, this would bring on bad feelings. And there were just different situations every now and then that would pop up where you see you knew you were shortchanged in certain arenas, and sometimes it was on principle. You know what used to bother me? It wasn't so much getting shortchanged, but to me it was a lack of appreciation of the work that you put into it and the success that it came out of it. That to me, if anything, not that I ever looked for it, you throw a little bonus, not shortchange you. If you truly appreciate. What your efforts brought forth, and so these would bring conflicts all the time. But look, that's a matter of life in the wrestling business. There were a lot of promoters. I didn't deal with all of them. I dealt with some that I thought treated me very fairly, and there were some, there's no question about it, I didn't get along with at all. But that's life, that's in anything, I guess.
Are you surprised that guys like Hogan and Flair are still actively wrestling, or at least trying to actively wrestle?
Well, I am surprised. And again, to each his own. For me, I told you I wanted to be out and still be on top. I don't want to be in there where people say, "Oh, geez, what's wrong with this guy? We don't want to see him. Get out of here." I wanted to get out before that, and I think I did, even though I was no spring chicken by any means. But the fact is, my last big hurrah was with Zbyszko, and you know what success that thing had, okay? Yeah. So that's when I got out, really short. After that, I had one match at the Meadowland when they first opened it up. Then I did a farewell tour of Japan, and I was done. So I feel, in that sense, I did what I wanted to do. These guys, well, everybody thinks differently. I personally think that neither one of them is any, Flair, like I said before, he used to go our matches, he could go, all that kind of stuff. But today, I think that his time is behind him. But then who am I to tell him or anybody that they should get out? Hogan, what can I say about him? I never thought of him much as a talent, and he's much of a less talent today than he was then. So what makes him stay in there? I have no idea. I hear he doesn't need the money. He certainly made a lot of money. So I don't know then what motivates a guy like that to want to be in there when I understand he's got knee problems, back problems, and all these kind of things. I certainly never wanted to be in there to where I felt that I'm making a fool of myself.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Do you have any thoughts on another very famous wrestler that's come out of Pittsburgh over the last several years, Kurt Angle?
You know what? I met Kurt Angle a number of times. I can't say that I really know him, really well. I respect him for his achievements. And listen, this guy went to the Olympics. He got the gold. What can you say? That's a great talent. I feel bad because I don't know his whole story. I don't know but there was a big story in the Pittsburgh papers. I mean, a real big story. And I found out that I'm sure everybody knows about it because it's been all over the internet and every place else. It's not like I'm saying something anybody doesn't know about. But I don't know how it came about, and I felt bad that I understand how much he was dependent on different medications to keep him going. And I understand that he had problems then, because even though there may be prescription drugs, a lot of drugs can be extremely addictive, as we all know.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how he is, how he's doing. I hope he's well. But sometimes that's a problem when you get injuries. When you get injuries and you take something to help that injury, all you're doing is masking the problem.
Yeah.
And by going in there, sometimes you can aggravate that problem much more. And then you're more dependent on something to carry on for them. This is a tough business, because it's not like I'm so envious of other athletes. When they get hurt, they put them through all this kind of rehab stuff, and they have this for us guys. We were like dogs. You get hurt. Hey, you got to go in there.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're the main event, man, you got to go. People don't realize how tough some of these guys are, because you have to go in there with some serious problems. Nobody cares. Hey, you've been advertised.
Yeah.
The place has got a heck of a house out there. My God, you got to go through. You're the guy that we've been advertising. Hey, I've gone with broken fingers. We just tape your fingers together. I've gone. And that was the terrible thing. I remember going in that ring sometimes, so much pain. And you just felt awful, because not only how you felt for yourself, but you felt like you were cheating the public, because they paid to see you, and now you can't give of yourself what you'd like to give, what you had done in the past. And that used to be very depressing for me, not only because I felt pain for myself, but you really felt like you shortchanged the people who paid their hard-earned money to come to that event.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of frustrations and stuff that go on with it. People don't know, I think, what sometimes everything you have to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of your critics might say that you're bitter. How do you answer that when critics say that you're bitter?
I've heard that so many times, and the funny thing is that some of the people say that I'm bitter, people that haven't seen me in 20, 30 years. I wonder what it is that they know about my life for them to make such a statement. I will tell you honestly, but I don't know how, I don't want to try to convince anybody, believe it or not. What does it matter? I wish these people say that I'm a bitter guy, that they were as happy as I am. Because, yeah, I'm older. I wish I was younger. I wish that I had never had some of these surgeries, because they were tough at the time. Today, I'm feeling a lot better. But I spent 20-some years on the road. Today, I retired. My parents lived to be in their 90s. So I was so grateful that I got out, and I still spent some years with my mom and dad. My mother died at the age of 97 in 1995, and my father died at 93 or 94 in 1986. I got out of the business in 81. So I got to spend a lot of time with my folks. And today, since I've been out of it completely, I kid around. I say I date my wife again, because on Saturdays we go out. We always go out. I have 4 beautiful grandchildren, and I have my 2 sons in Pittsburgh, my twins, Danny and Daryl, and they have with their kids. And so to me, I go back to the old country once a year, because I still go back to my town and other places. I mean, I look at myself every day. Now, in my day, we didn't make the millions of dollars. Believe me, nowhere near. What we made was pocket change next to some of these athletes today. But I consider myself the luckiest guy in the world, because I know that's a statement a lot of people made. I survived the war that I shouldn't have, because not only of the daily bombings, but the diseases. I came down with rheumatic fever, which a lot of people don't make it through with the best medical care. I had no medical care, and I laid there for 3 years, but yet I survived it. I got to come to the greatest country in the world, the United States of America, and I got to pursue my dream. I wanted to be a wrestler when I I became a wrestler. So, anybody who says I'm bitter, it's somebody who doesn't know me at all. Because if they knew me, they would know that I'm a happy guy, really, at this stage of my life, and a very extremely grateful guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And just closing out, we talked about the fans. Talk about your love affair with the city of Pittsburgh. Because I know one day we were talking on the phone and you were heading to the stadium to shoot something for the opening day of the Steelers season. And so it sounds like you still do a lot with the city.
Well, I did commercials for their opening for both the Steelers and the Pirates.
Okay.
And, of course, Billy Graham came to Pittsburgh and he said that nobody knew what was going to Pittsburgh. Even I did commercials. They played those commercials I did for both the Steelers and the Pirates. I mean, they played them every day. I don't know how many times a day. Pittsburgh, look, when I first came from Italy, this is where my dad was working. This became home. And so this is where my mom and dad lived. My wife's parents are from there. So that's home. And even though this is a great country, beautiful country, there's a lot of beautiful places here, I never considered moving out of Pittsburgh because the family's there,
Yeah.
And so and Pittsburgh's a nice town, actually. People still, some of the older folks still look at it as a smoky city, but it's anything but. It's not that anymore. That's gone. Unfortunately, the steel mills are gone, which provided a lot of work for a lot of people. But Pittsburgh's a good town. It's a reasonable town. It's not people can live there. It's not the most expensive place to live. You know what I mean? It's a good town. It really is. So I do like Pittsburgh. And I want to make another thing clear. I don't want anybody here who's going to see this whole thing to think that somebody said that I don't like any of the wrestlers out there today. And there's nothing further from the truth. I don't know most of the wrestlers today. Okay? I don't know. I don't like what McMahon has done to professional wrestling. I don't like the direction it was taken. I don't like to see that the major arenas aren't running on a regular basis anymore. To me, wrestling belongs to the arena. And the chemical stuff that bothers me tremendously. Again, last night when I was talking to Tom Brandy, here's a kid who's got, I say he's a kid because next to me he's a kid, but here's a guy who weighs about 280 and he's got a tremendous body, okay? And a guy like that should be on top, even anywhere in the wrestling business. But this guy refuses to use chemicals. He chose, God gave him a good frame, but he busted his butt to develop. And there are other people like Tom Brandy's. I don't know how many are out there because I don't watch it. And it's sad that this kind of people with that kind of mentality to do it the natural way, the good way, the hardworking way, are not the ones who are given the best opportunities. And I think that's sad. And like I say, I don't know how many Tom Brandys are out there. I don't know because I don't watch wrestling because, frankly, I've been turned off with what they've done to it. And I can't watch it and just fluff it off. I take it personal when I see McMahon, they tell me he drops his pants and says, "Kiss my butt" club and stuff. I've never seen it, but and if I did see it, it would anger me, it would upset me, and I'm not going to lose sleep over some of the stupid things that go on there. There's stuff like that. That's what bothers me. It's nothing personal with the wrestlers themselves, because I don't even know the wrestlers.
Yeah,
I really don't know most of those guys in there today. I just don't like what they've done to it. That's all, because I love this business.
Yeah,
I tried to be a good ambassador to the business throughout my career. I tried to conduct myself in a way that would not disgrace myself or the business. And to see then what followed with guys dropping his pants and somebody getting buried alive and somebody's been crucified and somebody's been run over in a parking lot with automobiles and what's that got to do with professional wrestling? What's it got to do with wrestling? That's stuff like that pained me great.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us today. This has been an incredible shoot interview, and wish you all the best and wish you further success.
Well, I thank you very much. And make no comebacks, though, right? I'm not.
One more comeback.
One more comeback. No, thank you. I enjoyed talking with you guys.
TitleMatchNetwork.com